Oh. Where am I? Why am I wearing an apron?
You are not Lord Macbeth?
No. My name is Prospero.
Pretty outstanding for a contest.
Thanks for the recording.
Thank you. I just wanted to take a moment to recognize our early childhood program here in Hudson, who's been identified as implementing an exemplary practice for the preschool service options publication by DPI. Will be identified in that publication and will be highlighted for our itinerant special ed services to child care centers here in Hudson, which includes preschool and in-home child care programs. We have services to more than 20 child care centers in town, serving more than 50 students. So we typically think of early childhood care at Rivercrest, we serve a number of kids out in the community. That group of centers also meets monthly with our early childhood team, and that's a very rare partnership and collaboration. So we provide a lot of training to our centers and home daycare providers around a number of best practices for early childhood care. So our early childhood team here in Hudson is eager and willing to assist in expanding and improving on services for young children in Wisconsin, and we're very proud of that for being identified by the DPA as an exemplary practice.
Congratulations, that's great.
Next, we have our fall athletics, which you know were very successful this year. So we'll invite Stephanie DeVos, our athletic director, to the front, and then she has others to introduce.
Thank you for having us. As you all know, we had a very, very successful fall season, and the list of accomplishments just seem like they just keep going on and on. And every day I open my email, it seems like there's an award for somebody from the fall. So it was very exciting. We brought the few athletes that we had available. It is a Tuesday night. We are in the middle of winter seasons. As soon as we're done here, we're off to, there's everything going on tonight, from hockey to basketball. So we are going to just give you a brief intro of what we're doing here. And the group I would like to introduce to you that is helping me behind the scenes, and that some of you may be aware are athletes making progress. See these young girls and boys. Anna is here with me tonight. They'll all have a shirt on. When you see these guys running around at the events, these are the ones that are making between. So please welcome Anna.
Welcome, Anna.
Thanks. Hi, I'm a senior at the Hudson High School, and I'm just going to introduce some of the different fall sports that we had with many accomplishments. We have cheerleading, and Miss Robley could not make it, but they recently had a competition in Des Moines, Iowa, and they won Division I state championship. Yeah, and they have an opportunity to go to nationals now, and so they are working on that for fundraising to get that opportunity. At this time, we have Mr. Cowles for football to tell you about his accomplishments.
Thank you. Vince Lindstrom is one of our representatives here tonight. Vince is an all-conference offensive lineman for us. We had a great year. We were 11-1. Went to the state semifinals. Really, I think if you ask these guys, they wish we could have got that one more. Got to the state and got to the championship game and won it. But you look back on what we did. I think we did some good things. We had about 18 guys that received some kind of all-conference recognition. 7 players received all-region recognition. We had 2 honorable mention all-states and 2 first-team all-state players. But I think all of that was because of these guys played as a team. All those individual awards and accomplishments was all because these guys, we had 41 seniors this year, which is just a tremendous amount, and every guy had a role on the team, and without one of them, it would have been a different team, and it wouldn't have been as successful. So it's just everybody doing things together. It's just a privilege to be able to work and coach with these guys. Thank you.
Thank you.
There's just a few things he left out. First of all, and I won't go on and on, but Coach Kells was also named BRC Coach of the Year, too, for the conference this year. And I know he might not like this, but he's a father of 2 now as of Saturday night. So a little baby girl,
Congratulations.
six
That's
pounds, Cecilia Rose. I also would like to share with you quickly a note of many that I received from the state of Wisconsin. And when I went to the AD convention towards the end of the football season, everybody was commenting on our sportsmanship. And they've even designed now a state award for sportsmanship. And they said, had that been in effect, there's a good possibility, and our name, Hudson, was out there for that state sportsmanship award. So that's a huge accomplishment. And if you went to any of the games, you could see by the behavior of the kids, the precedents that they've set for the rest of our sports. And it was not only football, it was all the sports involved, because it's catching on in a positive way. This is a note that I received from one of the administrators at Arrowhead, just one of many. Excuse me. My name is, dear Stephanie, my name is Jeff Steinbach, and I retired in 2008 from serving as AD at Arrowhead High School. I have been coaching all specialists in our Arrowhead High School football program for a number of years. Just wanted to let you know that I was extremely impressed by your football program, coaches, players, and fans. Your staff and kids were really classy both on and off the field. I know how hard everyone works behind the scenes to achieve success in every way possible. Your football program achieved the success in every way. Congratulations and continued success in running a classy program. With respect, Jeff Steinbach, Arrowhead High School. This was just one of many notes that I received. So congratulations to the football team and all the fall athletics this season. Okay, who do we have next?
All right. Girls golf, they could not make it, but boys golf coach Bill Schaub stepped in to coach the girls team this fall, and the team placed 5th at regionals. Jill Wanner received first team all-conference honors, and she'll be back next year to lead the team. And at this time, we have boys soccer.
So this season was pretty good for us. We ended up 19-5-3. So much better than last year. We had a really good team, a lot of team chemistry. Pretty much the same team as last year. We had this year too, so it was really fun to be the same team 2 years in a row.
Could you give us your name? Are you the coach? Oh, there's the coach.
No, I'm Seth.
Oh, okay.
These 2 young men are the captains of the team. We had really good leadership, Rocky Harmon and Seth Bloom.
Thank you.
And we did really well. In the playoffs, we played to go to state, and ironically, we tied, which is unusual, and we lost the tiebreaker, which ended up being penalty shootout. So we got as close as you can get without making it. Both these young men were all-conference players. We had 6 players named all-conference. And this young man, Rocky, was named Conference Player of the Year as well. Just had a tremendous season. So, thank you.
Congratulations.
Okay, and next we have girls swim and dive.
I'm Lindsay Bedford. I was one of the captains, and this is Kaya, and she was one of the captains too. And we had an amazing season this year. We were 8-1, and our only loss came to Eau Claire Memorial, and we had been the closest we had ever been to beating them. We were within 10 points of beating them. And we got second at conference, second at sectionals. We were 18th out of 52 teams at state, and Devin Sika, Erica Gunther, Natalie Wood, Emmy Reynolds, and Abby Durst all went to state for swimming, and they broke a lot of records this year, and we had just a great team bond and chemistry this year.
All right. I'm Kai Tulabowski. I'm a diver. I'm the dive captain. We had a lot of fun this year, and we just had really great team chemistry, and we also won the Big Rivers Conference Sportsmanship Award, so it was a lot of fun.
Thank you.
And next we have girls tennis.
Hi, I'm Bailey Knight. I was a senior captain on the girls' tennis team. We had a really fantastic year. We started looking kind of shaky. We kind of lost the top of the top last year. We weren't looking forward to having a fantastic year, kind of a rebuilding time. But we ended up doing absolutely fantastic with what we had, and we really built off of knowing that we had a lot of improvement to make. So we ended up being 18-6 was our overall record, and we got second place in the conference overall. And we had two of us, Alex and I, were doubles partners, and we were both first team all conference. And we just had a fantastic year.
Okay, I'm Alex, and we took third in our section out of 18 teams this year, which was awesome. And then we sent 5 people to state for tennis this year, and that's the most that we've ever sent. So we had Bailey and I went, Sydney Squires, Julia Douglas, and Kelsey Hines were the 5 people that went to state. And we saw the best competition of the entire year, and it was awesome to end our season at the top level at state on the big courts of Madison. So we had a great season.
Congratulations, wonderful.
Thank you.
And next we have volleyball.
Hi, I'm Hannah Worth, and this is Serena Schultz, and we were co-captains this year. And our overall match record was 23-11, so pretty good. We got 4th in the conference, which is better than last year.
And then we got first place in the silver division at the Sprawl, and that's 11th out of 30 teams. And last year, we got 14 out of 30, so we did better than last year.
And then we also got first place at our home tournament, so that was a highlight. That was good.
And then also one day after practice, we did, we all made tie blankets for a brighter day, and then we donated about 50 of them to children in the hospitals.
Tremendous.
It was just like an overall fun season.
Yeah, it was good.
Wonderful, thank you.
And next we have cross country.
My name is Don Krupa. I'm the cross-country coach for the boys and girls. This is Sadie Kroll, one of the girls captains, and Ryan Cromer, one of the boys captains. We had an excellent season this year. For the girls, they repeated again as getting to state. Last year they were second at conference. This year they were second at conference and earned the right to go to state, winning second in sectionals. The girls were there last year. They did a good job this year again, and they plan on being there again next year. On the boys' side, we fell a little short as far as team-wise, but we have Ryan Cromer, who did an excellent job this year. He repeated as conference champion, sectional champion, and what he was aiming for the last 3 years, he became the state champion, first time in Hudson cross-country history.
Oh, tremendous.
And from there, he went on to run at Nike Nationals and also the Foot Locker Nationals. And he will tell you a little bit about that. Anything to say?
Just that we had a great year. So.
Okay, Ryan?
Yeah. Well, our team was looking pretty good this year, but we started to fall apart. So, as Mr. Krupa said, I continued on to state as an individual, and I was going in as an underdog and ended up winning by over 10 seconds. That was a really big deal. And then I got the opportunity to fly out to Portland 2 weeks ago, and then Foot Locker was in San Diego last week. So I placed 9th and 8th there at the national meet. So wow. It's just been a lot of fun this year.
Yeah, I imagine.
Yep, I'm a senior. Not yet. Tour in Madison this weekend, though.
Ah.
And also the girls repeated as all state academic, all state. Last year, they were academic all-state as a team, and this year also, and there were several individuals that were academic all-state. And Ryan, again, academic all-state. He was at state meet all 4 years, and this year he won top honors. Thank you.
Tremendous. Congratulations.
You can sit down. At this time, too, being a parent, I always like to recognize the parents. Mr. and Mrs. Cromer, please stand. Thank you very much. My only question is, do you have any younger children? Darn.
I mean, that was John's son there?
Yes.
I never would have guessed.
And did you know that Mr. Krupa did coach John?
Really? No kidding.
So, and we have pictures of that, so it is true. So, I think we have one more award. I would like to do a few announcements. We do have 2 new coaches to recognize for this winter. Coach Joe Binky for girls basketball, and Christina Harstead will be recognized as our new head gymnastics coach. And just some exciting things. We will be doing a lot of recognition at halftime of the basketball games this winter. One of them will be in recognition of Craig Urbick. He will be coming back on January 18th. And also, just an FYI, there were over 60 athletes this fall that received academic all-conference honors. So just a few bits, and it should be in your newsletter. So thank you. I think next on the agenda was that the bench warmers.
Yep, I'll let you continue with that too.
If I could have Nikki Meyer come up, please. Nikki is representing the bench warmers this evening. 2 years ago, I came upon an award. I don't know, it was recognized if it was a new award, and it was a community service award by the WIAA. And WADA, Wisconsin Athletic Directors Association, was the foundation that really wanted to initiate it, but it was supported by the WIAA. What it is a community service award that any group or individual out in the community that we feel as an athletic director is worthy of helping our high school athletic programs should be nominated for this award. So for the past 2 years, last year I nominated Hudson Boosters Association, which they did receive the award, and this year I nominated the Benchwarmers under the former direction of Lynette Beinlich and Beth Holmes. Incoming president, Nikki Meyer, there's that lovely picture. Nikki will be the incoming president, and we look very forward for their time, their commitment, and their dedication to our high school football program. This is a neat award because there's so many groups and community associations and booster clubs that are helping our high school programs. I wish I could recognize them all in 1 year, but we'll take it one at a time and give credit where credit is due. So thank you, Benchwarmers and Nikki, and look forward to working with you.
Thank you. I look forward to working with you as well.
I think that's it. Thank you for having us this evening.
Thank you, Stephanie. And I think I say this every month. We're very proud of all the accomplishments of our students, their skills and so forth. There's certainly things to be admired. But I think equally important is the fact that we hear about the sportsmanship, we hear about their character, and that, as much as anything else, represents our community. And I think that's critically important. We could be top in everything, and if we had poor sportsmanship, it certainly would diminish that. So thank you for that. Thanks for representing our community the way you do.
I do have one more thing, which is an important foundation of, and he was supposed to go first, I'm sorry, which has become an important foundation of our athletic program, and that's our middle school program. Aaron Moen is going to give you a quick update on our middle school programs.
Okay.
I'm going to turn this into a positive that she didn't forget me. She saved the best for last. So. Just real quick, one thing we want to try and promote at the middle school, and our mission. We want to try and get the kids to that next level, obviously, to high school, and keep participation numbers up when they reach the high school level. So we want to teach them the balance between schoolwork and then extracurricular activities and how important that is. We do have practice and events only 4 days a week, so it is a little bit easier transition for them up to high school the next year where they have 5 days a week. The next thing, we teach fundamentals and then teach play dynamics to students, trying to build that success for them as they get to high school, and trying to bridge that gap for them and try and make it as easy as possible. Providing opportunities for all students, skill levels to participate. As we know, as you get higher in the ranks into the varsity level, it becomes harder and harder. At the middle school level, we like to try and promote all skill levels to participate, high numbers. Volleyball and football this fall added more teams to be able to accommodate those extra students that wanted to go out but maybe weren't skilled enough to get a shot if there's so much depth on the teams. So that was one positive we kind of faced and then helped out this fall. The fourth kind of key point of our mission was establishing a relationship with the high school varsity coaches and programs. This fall, all the varsity coaches, or a majority of them can make it, attended middle school football practices on Mondays to help out the middle school football teams, which is a huge commitment out of their time, already putting in plenty of hours. But they had Monday night practices, so they were able to swing by right after school and make it work for them, and it was a huge value for us, and I know the kids really enjoyed having them around and then supporting them on Friday nights too. Our numbers are high as usual. Cross country, we had 112 students participate in cross country. That's 6th through 8th grade. We had 130 girls participate in volleyball, and then 137 7th and 8th grade boys participate in football. So our numbers are going up, which is an extreme, positive for our program, and we're trying to keep those numbers going up so we can have more numbers passed on to these high school coaches, and then hopefully making a positive impact on the student athletes' lives. A couple things we're trying to work on, communication methods to students and parents during the seasons. Our coaches are now using classroom pages that the teachers are also using to communicate to parents. Now we're bringing that into the athletics to try and make things a little more out front, easy to navigate, hopefully bringing up participation levels again. Our track program, I'm going to work with Jerry Yucatel to try and make some more positives happen there. And then basketball, same thing, working with the varsity coaches to try and make things as positive as we can. So, thank you.
Thank you, Aaron.
Thank you. And then next we have a special presentation, I guess I could say, regarding United Way. Each year we start out in the fall at our opening workshop, kicking off our United Way campaign throughout the district. And once again, our staff have really stepped up to the plate again and reached into their pockets. And we have John Coughlin with us here this evening to kind of share that the good news about our contributions and our assistance with United Way throughout the area.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm John Coughlin, Executive Director of United Way St. Croix Valley, and I'm here to say thank you tonight. We, on behalf of the Board of Directors of United Way, and also most especially all the many people that are served by the United Way campaign each year. I'm here to recognize the Hudson School District staff as the best school campaign that we have in our 3-county service area, not only in terms of total numbers, as you can see, over $22,000 was donated by district staff this year, but also in terms of participation and enthusiasm. I want to especially kind of single out our, what we call the employee campaign leader, and that's Deb Weisert, who just kind of pulls that all together between all the buildings and gets that enthusiasm going, and they do a lot of fun things in terms of baskets and raffles and things like that, in addition to the payroll deduction donations. One of the things that most people probably don't know is that United Way sends about half of that money that's donated by the district employees back to the district to support things like the peer helper program at the high school and the angel funds that all all of the elementary school buildings. So basically, we kind of do that because those are great programs, and we want to be supportive of them, and also realize that district staff is often dipping into their own pockets to help students out, and those angel funds are a way that they can give it a little bit at a time through payroll deduction, and then it goes back to those programs. So really just here to say thank you and recognize a fabulous campaign by district staff. And maybe if I could get Mary and Deb to come up here, we could get a picture for and Tom too, because I think the entire community of Hudson needs to know what a caring group of people the district employees are. Hi, Tom. Good to see you. Who wants this? All right, thanks.
Thanks, man. Thank you, John. Okay, well, absolutely.
You know, Tom and I got to be in that picture, but really I'd wish that we could have a picture with all of our employees who have contributed to United Way, because this really represents their contributions to our community and those in need in our community. United Way is a wonderful program, and also just want to thank Deborah Weiser for her leadership, as John did, just echoing that. That means a lot, and it makes a difference. So thank you, John. And again, thanks you to all of our employees who've been very generous.
Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to the next agenda item, which are the reports. So we've got two reports: district goals, secondary space for learning, community conversations. Mary is going to report on that.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I would ask at this time for Pete Kling to come forward. He was the facilitator at the community conversation, so I'll give an introduction and he can take a seat up at the table and get started with that. You know, the board has approved this district goal that we're going to address a couple times tonight to solve our secondary space for learning enrollment issues at both the middle school and the high school. And the board has supported a very significant community engagement process to inform you and give you feedback about how the community feels in relationship to secondary space and what the needs are and what they will support. So as part of this process, we invited members of the community to attend 2 sessions to give their feedback, our initial feedback, and those were held on November 29th and December 6th at Camp St. Croix. The focus was really on 3 initial questions that Pete will talk about in a few minutes. And conversations about those questions are really to begin the process of, again, looking at how do we prepare and educate secondary students. So the participants were given copies of HSD 2025, our strategic vision, the middle school house philosophy, high school learning for the future plan, and secondary space for learning, the board approved criteria. Pete was the facilitator at both sessions, and we used the World Cafe model. This is the first time that we've used this model, I believe, in the district, at least at the district level. And as we continue this community engagement process, we feel that this is a real positive way for us to get feedback from the community. So we plan to continue this conversation in the future as we have more information about the solutions that we move forward. So Pete, I'm going to turn it over to you to summarize these community conversations. And board members, you have a report at your table that looks something like this that you could probably read along as Pete talks about it.
Yeah.
Pete.
So I work for St. Croix County UW Extension. My office is in Baldwin, and a lot of the work that I do is organizational development, facilitation, land use planning, and even dabble a little bit in renewable energy. But really, my title is Community Resource Educator. And so I provide lots of assistance to all county boards, town boards, nonprofits. And I was fortunate enough to be asked to help facilitate a process to gather some information for you. And we decided to use a World Cafe model because it really allows people to talk in a small group and share ideas. And then, and as we use these 3 questions, it's a little bit like musical chairs. We talk about the first question as a group, and then we mix it up. Talk about the second question and mix it up again and talk about the third question. And so ideas and thoughts are able to be connected and shared with a variety of people. And overall, I thought the process, the 2 events that we had went very well. We had about 26, 27 people at the first, I guess 25, and we had 20 at the second one. And so I'm not here to overanalyze this data, but I am here to at least represent the data and provide any feedback, or at least provide some context to how we generated this. So what I did for you, and I'm not going to read through all of this. You can read through this at your leisure, but this is a part of a process. I'm assuming, strategic planning for most organizations is not an event, it's a process. This information is just one piece that goes into your, these are some key stakeholders that came out on a cold night in November and December and shared information. So for that, I appreciate the commitment from the residents that were willing to do that, and there were a number of staff that were there as well. A couple, probably 2 or 3 staff at each event, but it was primarily residents from the Hudson School District. So the way that I've prepared this report is really just the raw data, but organized into some themes. And you might take a look at this and move some of these comments into some different themes, or maybe you even want to come up with your own themes. But at least it gives you a starting point and at least another person's perspective that, isn't necessarily so engaged in the process. So for the first question, there were some themes that were highlighted. Interpersonal skills, you could also say character traits. I mean, it was quite apparent that people wanted those types of skills in addition to the math and the reading and the arts, but it's interpersonal skills, and certainly we've heard pieces of that in the reports earlier tonight. Home and community. Education is not just what happens at the school during the school hour, but certainly education is something that's embraced by the community. And certainly there are things that can happen at home that affect performance. And so dealing with some of those issues is something that was on people's minds. A student-centered approach. You're concerned about each student, making sure that we're meeting the needs of those students. Curriculum. Lots of thoughts about skills, different learning environments. Again, critical thinking, not memorization, but knowing how to get to a certain answer. Those were things that people brought up. Technology was something that you'll see throughout this document. Lots of discussion about online courses, lots of ideas about that, about using technology. Global competition, this one I wasn't, it's really the globalization of everything we do. We're competing on a global market. We need to prepare our students to be able to compete in that arena. And so those are the types of comments that you've got there. Learning environment, kind of an atmosphere of learning, I guess, is the way I would categorize a number of those types of those comments. There was some discussion about post-secondary opportunities, not just four-year institutions, but certainly two-year institutions. There was some discussion about, making some of that available early and often, so that, kids were able to be, were able to have some choices and to be successful with whatever they do after high school. And then I've just lumped some things under general comments. But again, these are the words that were written down by people at the tables. And so these are unfiltered, uncensored comments for the board. The next question had to do with types of facilities that best support the middle school house concept. This first one, I've got grade groupings. There was some discussion, not a lot of comments there, but there was some discussion about ideas of grades that could be grouped. You'll see it in the third question as well. And so I pulled that out as a separate category. Buildings and facilities, I think that tends to speak for itself. Bricks and mortar, but also, I guess that pretty much, mostly bricks and mortar under that category. Again, technology is coming up. The house concept, it appears that people like the house concept. I don't think there was a negative comment about that concept. So at least you're getting some positive feedback about what you're doing already. Collaboration, working together, whether that be a community space or within the school itself. Another curriculum category, I learned something about STEAM. I hadn't heard of STEAM before, science, technology, engineering, art, and math. Sounds like an interesting...
STEM.
Or is it STEM?
No.
They
Oh, is it
said it was
art.
STEam.
Oh.
Because I asked that too. I said, that's STEM, right? No,
Yeah,
it's
that's what I
STEam.
heard. Oh.
So
Pardon me.
Flexibility of space. As I was listening to people talk, there was lots of open conversation about flexibility, whether that be leasing, whether that be renting, whether that be community space that's used by lots of different organizations. Flexibility was a common theme there. And then again, some general comments for you to consider. The third question, what do you see as the best long-term 21st century learning solution for Hudson students in grades 6 through 12? This first one I pulled out because, again, there was some conversation about it, maybe not lots of comments, but connecting industry and business to what's happening in the school system, I think, is key. And that even hints at some of the post-secondary, two-year institutions especially, and some of the four-year. But there was some strong conversation around making those connections. I'm sure you have some already, so that's going to verify some things maybe that you're already doing. And then some buildings and facilities. I even called it architecture because it seems to me that the comments in this section are getting at some type of design and thinking about how that space might be designed, how it might be used, whether it be a new structure or even remodeling an existing structure. Again, that had quite a bit of, and then there was some discussion you'll see there about long-term. That might be something to consider. What do you define as long-term and what do people in the district define as long-term? You can see one of the comments is 10 years, let's not be here in 10 years, or long-term by that person's definition is 50 years. So and that basis for a common understanding, I think, is a good point so that you're kind of on the same page as you're planning, at least with community members. Let's see, we're down the home stretch here. Learning environment. Again, learning environment, a number of themes are coming through here. Social and emotional issues are coming out. Outdoor learning environment. So I think those are the things that pop out there. Change agent, I kind of put that in there as, I'm not sure if that is the school, if that is the teaching standards, learning environment, but certainly there's lots and lots of change. I think all of us have experienced this. You put a plan together in a year or two, it's obsolete. And so change and dealing with all of those things that are happening is important, and the school, needs to recognize that and to be able to adapt and grow as those changes take place. Flexibility and change, kind of the same thing. Again, buildings and facilities and curriculum and learning needs to be flexible and adapt to some of those changes. Core competencies, a number of these skills, again, reflect back to what you might expect your students to have as they graduate. These are some things that I'm sure you have in place and are being reinforced by the people at this event. And then there was a section here on suggested options, and these are some options that, as I understand from talking to Tracy, maybe you'll even talk in some greater detail about this later on tonight. But people felt the need to throw some options out there and to, take a stab at the way they saw things shaking out. One of the other pieces that I didn't pull out, but I just about did at the 11th hour, but I thought I would mention it anyways. There were a number of comments about demographics, making sure that people understand, the changing demographics or what those numbers mean to the district and what they mean to facilities is important. And I understand, again, you'll be talking about that later tonight. So I think that's a good thing. That means, from my viewpoint, you're kind of on the same page as what your stakeholders or what your external environment is providing as comments. Just included a couple of pictures for those of you that weren't there. That's what it looked like at Camp St. Croix. And again, the first night we had a hard time getting people out of there because I always try to keep meetings fairly short and to the point. We met for an hour and a half. An hour of this discussion, and then people are free to go because I know everybody's busy, and actually it was hard to get their attention the first night. Nobody wanted to leave, and that's a good sign. That means that people were talking and engaged in the conversation. It's a good way also to share lots of ideas and to not feel threatened. I know so many times when we've got issues like school districts that school boards deal with, they can be pretty tough, and there can be a lot of conflict. This type of format allows people to share without, any one person dominating or really bullying or any of those kinds of things. So I think it can be a very good process to get information. It's probably not the best way to make decisions. Certainly, this board is in a position to make decisions, but it's a good way to get information. And so, if that's something that you liked, we could certainly train people on it, or we could help facilitate some other discussions as well.
Any questions?
That's it.
Any questions, comments?
Mr. President? Just a comment, having attended the session and listened to community members and briefly just reading tonight through these comments as well, it was amazing how much alignment there was with HSD 2025 and the plan for the high school learning for the future, and certainly the support for the middle school concept. So it really said to me as I was listening that we're on the right page for the people that attended and felt that. And there's a lot of support for that in the written comments that are here and the comments that people said in these cafe conversations, in the small group conversations. So I think, again, that's another affirmation that we're on the right track.
And then I neglected to talk about the fourth question, but we had talked a little bit about this, but I think it's good to open it up at the end. And we simply said, is there anything else that the board should know about that we haven't talked about tonight? And we just asked people to write things down on a sticky note and give it to me. And those were the comments that we received from, eliciting that from the group. So that was just kind of a open-ended question at the end of both of our sessions.
Thank you. Thanks very much for the report. Yep. Okay, we are then moving on to 4B, which is 2011-12 Special Education Referral and Placement. Corey.
Thank you. Tonight's my pleasure to share with you updated data on our district-wide special education referral and placement data. And if you remember in October of 2011, about a year ago, I shared with you that we had at that time reduced the number of new referrals and special ed evaluations and placements in the district. And we've added a fourth year of data to this slide. And in your materials, you'll see there that we continue to reduce the number of students that we identify and place in the district. And these would be students that we identify and place for the first time. This is not students that move in to the district on an IEP, but these are students that we identify for the first time. And these results are very impressive because districts struggle to attain this. Our overall child count does remain relatively stable. However, I would point out that we have fewer students in special education than we've had since all the way back to the 09-10 school year. And what that really means is students are being more successful in the general ed program. They do not need the intervention to the point of needing to be identified as a student with a disability to get services. So I want to thank Learning Services and Student Services for working together on our initiatives such as RTI, PBIS, and some of the other things that are supporting student learning along with our building principles, because we are seeing a reduction in at least the students that we place. We are still a very desirable location for families to move to because of our reputation for providing excellent service. So we do still see a large number of families moving in and getting services, and we have to accept those plans and implement those plans. However, we are below the state average. The state average is anywhere from 14 to 15% of your overall population receiving special ed, and we're in the 12% range. So we still have fewer in program, even though we still get a lot of students moving in. And just to kind of wrap things up, I would be remiss without saying, part of the results are due to a collaborative effort to provide focused, effective professional development for the staff we have. And I would also say we really have talented staff. They do an excellent job. And the work that they do is reflected here that because of that success in students learning at higher levels, we have fewer students needing intervention. So the students we do have are being more of the variety of the severe disability kinds of situations. But the more mild disabilities, we're just identifying less and less because they're making it in the general ed classrooms. So I think we're making progress. We'll see how far we can keep pushing those numbers down before we level off a little bit. But I think we continue to have success in this area. So we just thought it'd be important for you to see the progress we're making here. So I'll entertain any questions you might have.
Any questions for Corey? So Corey, what do you attribute this to? I mean, you've mentioned, staff development, things like that. And am I not on? You mentioned quality of staff and development and so forth. Is that the primary driver of these changes?
I'd say it's more of it's still very important, but I think the part that maybe the learning and program development folks have heard most is our structures we've been putting in place around interventions through the general ed program, and then our efforts to bolster our core curriculum and differentiate instruction and how to meet the needs of all learners in our general classrooms instead of relying on that to be provided elsewhere. So the structures we've been putting in the last 3 to 4 years are starting to get us these results that we hope we can continue with.
Wouldn't you say that, and just a commentary to this, and then I'll let Mary talk, is that this goes beyond just being able to move kids from one resource to another, but it also affects the child's, I think, esteem and reduces stigma in some respects?
And I'd also add that our staff have more and more have the mindset of we can meet the needs in the general classrooms. Yeah. And I want to, again, thank our principals for leading in the buildings, all their staff, for what can we do instead of, well, we can't do that. Someone else's job is to meet the needs of this student. So we've raised our expectations in meeting the needs of all of our students.
Right.
Tremendous.
I'd say some of that system too is the collaboration time. So for example, when a whole group of fourth grade teachers sits down and looks at those students and their needs, like Corey's saying, it's all students. These are all of our students. What can we do for them? And again, it's working.
And although most of our referrals come at the elementary level, it's our middle school and high school staff and the leadership in those buildings that are making a significant difference.
That's tremendous. Mary?
Well, Sandy and Corey have both hit on the key elements. It's a system for learning that we've been working on for quite a few years now. And it's multiple things. It's not one. It's trying to maximize, or it's working to maximize each student in their learning for multiple years so that they builds on each other and each student being successful at higher levels. So it's things like SMART goals. It's things like response to intervention that Corey talked about. It's helping our teachers, supporting professional development. It's the instructional coaches that you have provided resources for. I mean, we could just keep going on. It's collaboration time, big time. We're looking at data, but it's a whole systems approach. It's not one thing, it's multiple things. And this is just one piece of data that supports that it's working. And other districts would be envious of this data and want to see the same kind of results.
I just know from my point of reference, having worked in most of my career with youth in a different venue, that for us it was always the strive to mainstream kids as much as we could, rather than isolate or to put them into other separate boxes, so to speak. So anyway, so good, congratulations. We're proud of that. Anybody else? Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Corey. I don't believe we have any citizens' requests to speak. Looking at the table down there, looks like, no? Okay, we'll move on to then topics for action. And the first one is District Goal 2013-14, High School Learning for the Future Implementation, Freshman Academies. Mary.
And I'll start the introduction to this as Principal Laura Love and Dean of Students Josh Halverson come forward and get ready to present information to you. And I just want to refresh our memories about how we got here. In 2008, the board adopted the HSD 2025 strategic vision, which led us forward to looking at how do we implement that vision at the high school so that we prepare students for their future. In 2009-10, we started at the district level, High School Learning for the Future, the research study team. And Laura, you're smiling at me because you're going to say this? Okay. So maybe I should stop and turn it over to you. Obviously, we didn't rehearse that. So in 2009-10, High School Learning for the Future research team, and that was a district-level team that included staff and administrators, parents, and students. And they recommended 4 areas of focus to you: advisories, project-based learning, transitions for freshmen and seniors, and small learning communities. So then we moved to the next year, 2010-11, and that was a planning year to create an implementation plan. And it really moved back to the high school to really move that work forward at their level. In 2011 and 12, as part of that plan that you approved, freshman advisories were started and the project-based learning course was started the second semester. This year, the high schools moved those freshman academies to the sophomore level and welcomed new freshmen into academies. And now we're looking forward to 2013-14 with freshman academies. Did I say that wrong? And you smiled at me, didn't you? Advisories and academies are easy to confuse, which I just did. So sophomore advisories, and now we're looking towards freshman academies. And that's the next step in implementation and continues that district goal of implementation of high school learning for the future. So I don't make any more mistakes on that. I'm going to have Laura and Josh continue on because they are into this work very deeply.
That's on, okay. So as Mary stated, we're in our 4th year of high school learning for the future. And in that first year after the district-wide committee that included students, administrators, staff members, and parents in the community, when it came to the high school, we had study teams, and one study team was in place for each of the 4 components Mary mentioned. Every one of those study teams had parents, teachers, and students, and then a co-chair, administrator, and teacher on the 4 study teams. What I'm going to do is just quickly review the purposes behind each of those 4 components. And the 4 components are in the graphic that you see there. So you can't see transitions. That's the first one that I'm going to talk about. And so we tried to illustrate that using Hudson Middle School, where our students are coming from, and post-secondary options, which actually you heard about tonight in the report, and we'll connect some of this to our post-secondary options as well. So for the goal of the transition study team was in making smooth transitions from the middle school, and then also making senior year look different enough so that students were prepared to be successful no matter what their choice after high school. The purposes and the goals behind those transitions being smooth are things like collaborating with others, connecting with adult mentors in and outside of Hudson High School, students who are motivated and inspired through relevant learning experiences, and caring for themselves, others, and the environment. In the small learning community component, and you'll see that actually in 4 places in the schematic, the Freshman Academy is one aspect of our small learning communities, and we'll talk specifically about that one tonight. And then the 3 learning communities from 10th through 12th grade just are represented there as kind of A, B, and C. We're actually looking at 5 small learning communities for 10th through 12th grade based on the research on the most effective size, and then also on options for post-secondary planning and connecting to kind of all the fields for college and career. So the small learning community purpose really is personalized learning both academically and socially, and then helping students focus on an academic path for the future. With the project-based learning component that you'll see there kind of behind the other graphic, it fans out from freshman year through senior year because it's implemented through both classrooms and through the advisory component, in that we hope to have students having experiences that start out as broad and maybe are more guided by the faculty member, and then as they become seniors, they would really guide a lot of that learning themselves. So the project-based learning component goals are teaching 21st century skills, and if you think about that statement, it's actually today's skills, because we're in the 21st century and they need them now. Communication, presentation, organization, time management, research, and inquiry skills. Those are the goals of our project-based learning component. And then advisories, which we're actually in the 2nd year of implementing, so all of our freshmen and all of our sophomores are in advisories. And the goals behind those advisories are creating connections, supporting academic success, developing life skills and personal growth, and mentoring. And I know I've shared a number of statistics that we've collected from our own students behind those advisories, but just a couple of things that I think kind of pop out with regard to both small learning communities and advisories. Since implementing advisories, students report on external assets. The comment is, my school provides a caring, encouraging environment. In 9th grade in 2009-10, so before we implemented high school learning for the future, 26% of our 9th graders agreed with that statement. After implementing 9th grade advisory in the 11-12 school year, the 9th graders, 77% reported that my school provides a caring, encouraging environment. And that's a major goal of both of our advisories and our small learning communities. We also have many other jumps. I'll just report one other. In 2009-10, our 9th graders, 57% agreed with this statement. I care about my school. 2 years later, ninth graders, so a different group of students, 75% of students reported that they cared about their school. So we're really seeing from our own students data that supports the high school learning for the future components. And what we're going to share with you tonight are specifics about implementation of the freshman advisory program. Essentially, we're calling it academies, because ninth graders are no longer in houses, and they don't want to be in middle school once they're in ninth grade. And yet it's a similar philosophy, and you've heard Dan Koch talk about that philosophy many times. We're looking at research from many other schools and from university institutions who study the freshman academy component. And Josh is going to tell you a little bit more about why freshman academies and then what it looks like.
How you doing? To start off on why is, the freshman year is the most important year, and there's almost nobody that will dispute that. Here's an interesting fact. Ninth grade attendance is a better predictor of graduation than an eighth grade test score. So, that's really important to realize is that, and the huge transition, they're coming from very highly structured classrooms and buildings, and then are moving to the high school where there's even more students and really more ability for a student to get lost. That, and with stuff that we can't control, home life, socioeconomic status, all those other background things, allows for what Pete talked about. And the number one is probably that connection. So by having a freshman academy, and if we don't really quite discuss on how it works, but we will tonight, it allows 3 teachers to work with basically 90 students. So they can sit down, they can talk about specific students to all 3. So now we have 3 adults working maybe with 1 student. So that really increases the chances of students getting caught that may fall between the cracks. Other things for the why on this, number one is we got to see some schools. St. Louis Park and Superior are 2 schools, one's in Minnesota, one's right here in Wisconsin, that are using freshman academies. Myself and teachers were able to sit in on these meetings where we actually have common planning time with the group. We're thinking English, social studies, and science would probably be our group. But they're able to look at that individual student, and then all 3, and sometimes even a counselor, can join that and deal with whatever issue they're working on. And then it's move on to the next one, and it's maybe only one teacher now needs to make that parent phone call, and then they can actually service more students that way. We talk about in industry and in the classroom and everything else, the need for data-driven decisions. Well, now we have one group of students with the same pattern, the same path. They know what other teachers they have, so they can look at the data and then make better decisions for that student. And then you can do some really cool stuff too. It's not always about worrying about that student that could fall through the cracks, but now we've got 3 teachers that are going to have the same groups of students. They're going to move from one class to the next. Maybe we can collaborate. Maybe social studies and science can look at figures through American history and also what's going on in a chemistry lesson and combine. There's no reason why the bells don't have to really rule the classroom anymore. They can join classrooms, they can change where they want to go, and it's that collaboration, and goes back to also what Pete mentioned, the real world. What can they group together? Maybe all 3 classes can group together, and now you've got 3 periods where maybe you can leave the school walls and go do something for the community, or bring community members into the building as well. So it allows for extreme flexibility. Another cool thing is actually Superior has parent meetings during this time, this collaboration time, so they can do a 5-minute check-in, whether it's a phone conversation or the parent can actually come into the building if that works for them. So the whys are, you could go on almost forever. It's unbelievable what happens as soon as an adult makes a connection with a student. As soon as that occurs, you're gonna have success. So that's kind of the whys from my perspective. Is that good? I could go on forever.
I think if you want to flip to the next graphic. This will just give you an idea of Josh and my puzzle to be solved. We used this year's data, and I just want to give you a couple of terms there. Students who took, in the middle of the page under enriched and regular data, students who took ES, that means enriched science. Students who took EE, that means enriched English. And then if you go to the third column to the right, it says ES but not EE. So that means students who took enriched science but not enriched English. And then right below that, students who took enriched English but not enriched science. So we wanted to make sure that this puzzle of freshman academies was going to work for every student we could possibly come up with. And you don't really have to understand all the numbers, but those who take enriched science but not enriched English are very few. We have almost double the number of students who take enriched English but not enriched science. So we have about 5 or 6 sections taking enriched English, actually more than that. And what we did was we took all this data from several years and we plugged that into our puzzle and we created the next document, which I think Josh describes better. So I'm going to turn it back over to Josh.
So again, the whole idea is to not limit a student's choice. Okay, so a freshman coming in, some may choose to take the enriched science, some may take the enriched English. We don't offer an enriched social studies curriculum. And they pretty much self-identify along with the middle school and on that placement. So what we have is kind of a multicolor calico grid, and ideally, let's just look at Team 1. Team 1 would be our freshman Academy 1. You know, we can give it names. We don't call it houses, though. And what we're thinking is having these in the AM and the PM. And this would be the only kind of structured time where the students have to go from one class to the next class to the next class. The rest of their schedule is available for electives. It's classes they have to take already. You have to take freshman English, you have to take modern world history, you have to take a science. So we're not changing anything curriculum-wise or order or anything like that. So if we look at Team 1, we've got Class A. So Class A made up of 26 students, whatever that may be. Their first hour class for this group would be an enriched English, and then they would move to second hour, which would be modern world history, and then third hour enriched science. That allows those teachers then to have that group of students in that progression. So we have another class that wouldn't be in the enriched English because they have to be in enriched science. So if you look across that matrix, it's going to be 3 different science, English, and social studies, either way that you look at it, and allows, for that teacher then to teach that class 3 times. But because of this, enriched English, modern world history, they can collaborate. They can decide that, I really need 25 minutes because I have to give a quiz today. I know you're giving special reports on something in modern world history. Why don't you take a little more time, because I know I'm going to do a writing lab and I want more time to, so they can go ahead and make those adjustments. And again, the communication, all that stuff is there. So Team 1 is our dream team because it only requires 1 English teacher, 1 social studies, and 1 science. What makes it tricky is that a teacher is only scheduled 5 periods in a 7-period day. If it was 6, that's easily divisible, but that's not the case. So as we move along, if we were to let's look at a PM team like Team 4, that's one that's going to be taking place probably later in the afternoon perhaps. but we need 2 science teachers because we've used up that other science teacher so our green one is used in team 3 on that. So it is a puzzle, but it does still allow for a group of students to move from one teacher to the next. So if we look at the sections, and the reason why we showed you the data previous is all of this data reflects this year's numbers. And probably looking at maybe another, I don't know, I'm not an expert, don't take me my word for this, maybe another 50 students, freshmen, could be coming in looking at what may happen. So at least 6 teams works great. You know, and if it's 7 teams, we can still work that because those teachers are still needed to teach those classes. So it doesn't change anything staff-wise. It's what we're already doing. It's just creative scheduling and allowing for staff members to collaborate and talk to one another.
Sorry. Just to add a couple of things without an explosion. 2 things that you might notice: there are no math classes and there are no PE classes. I wanted to explain why those other core areas that freshmen have to take are not there. One is with regard to math, they come in at 3 levels. So it's not as easy as dividing enriched and regular. In another school district where I was teaching in a system like this, the math teacher couldn't keep it up. We felt it was more important to maybe bring the math teachers into the area of our freshman academy, so we'll be relocating teachers to cluster them together, but not necessarily to attach them to the teams. PE teachers are not there because many of our PE students in grade 9 take it in the summer. So they're not necessarily taking PE when they're taking these other classes. They could be, but many freshmen take it in the summer. So those 2 are not connected there. Something I just alluded to, and is part of the academies we've seen, is that they're clustered in a location in the building. One of the things we've talked about is the passing time and students going from the far west side to the far east side and back and forth. And what this does is locating freshman academies together on the west side of the building for the first 3 periods of the day or the last 3 periods of the day keeps 90 times 90 times, or 90 plus 90 plus 90 freshmen in that area of the building. So it reduces the effect size of the back and forth down the hallway at least a few times in the morning and a few times in the afternoon. And we believe that will relieve some of the pressure on the crowded hallways. The other opportunity by relocating teachers together is it gives them that in-between time to have 5-minute conversations about how things went or how Johnny's doing today. And that's a very important aspect of academies, is that they're located near each other in the building. That does cause people nervousness about relocating, and so that is something that we're talking with staff about. We've already made some adjustments based on staff feedback. The other piece that I wanted you to know is that there's a leader from each of these departments who's involved in guiding this ship forward, and we've taken them to a few locations at other high schools who are doing this, and then we've met with them in between, and so they're really involved in the planning process to give us feedback about this isn't going to work, or let's try this, or that sort of thing. So we have about 5-6 teacher leaders and a school counselor who's really great with puzzles and scheduling, who's attached to this leadership team with us. I think that's it. Do you have questions?
Questions, comments? Everybody confused? Mark?
Yeah, well, I'm a little confused. Just a question. Team 2 and Team 3, they look identical. Are they supposed to be? Or?
There's a slight difference. It's hard to tell because of the coloring, but Team 3 has an extra science teacher on it. There's a greenish versus the browns that's right in the middle in the first column on Team 3. So that's the science teacher that's also possibly involved in Team 4. If Team 3 is in the morning, then Team 4 would be in the afternoon. So Team 2 only has 3 total teachers, 1 for each core, and Team 3 has 2 science, 1 social studies, and 1 English teacher. It's just a slight variation in the color. It's really hard to tell.
Yeah, See, I just didn't know what the color represented, thanks.
If you look at, hopefully the bottom, is there more to this graph? If you look and you scroll down, what's interesting is because we used this year's schedule, like a red English 1, we actually have a name attached to us in our heads on who that is. So each color is a different. So even if they had the same schedule pattern, that's not an issue because they're different teachers in different classrooms. So it could have what it looks like on paper, the same flow from one class to another, and that still works with that.
That is really loud. Sorry about that. Just two things to summarize, and I know you've already asked for questions, Mr. Holland. One is we see data that supports students in freshman academies, and we think that that's really valuable. But 2, we didn't really say, when do we plan to go to this route? So next year, every freshman would be a member of 1 academy team. There won't be any freshmen who are not on a team. And that would continue to roll forward, that when they're in an academy team, we'll be planning the first of probably 2 10th through 12th grade academies, and we'd be bringing those proposals to you this spring. So then the following year, we'd be implementing 1 or 2 10th through 12th grade career-focused academies or college and career academies, something like health and human sciences or global learning or something like that. So those would be coming to you the following year.
Other questions? What I hear from this is that there's some principal values to this. One is that these freshmen have a small group experience and have consistency with teachers, staying with the same teacher. It also provides flexibility then in the teaching as well as what I've heard. So as we move and progress to the 2nd grade and so forth, it begins to evolve more into focused directions for individual students that have potential career competencies or whatever, or skill competencies. I'm keep looking for your nodding so that I understand this correctly.
That's correct, and we'll be bringing to you kind of a specific plan for communication and implementation with regard to each of those. But what we are looking at are the 16 career clusters that the state of Wisconsin has, and then also programs of study that both 2-year and 4-year colleges have. And Sandy's giving us some guidance on that, and Melissa Hansen, who's our school to career coordinator. So those would be much more focused. We would hope to have a mentor for every student who can help both in and outside of the school, who can help them make some college and career choices. When I've talked with parents in the community, there's a lot of interest behind that because it's hard to spend a lot of money on colleges or post-secondary programs and have your child change their mind 2 or 3 times. And we'd like to give them that opportunity to explore those things before they leave Hudson High School. And we don't think it's too early for them to get out and do a job shadow. We don't think it's too early for them to be doing some project-based learning around a career of interest to them. So.
Okay. Yes, Pat.
A question here is, Okay, you have Enrich English, and you'll have that the first semester, you'll have it the second semester. Will you have another set of teachers, or will they have the same set that they had in the first semester? It won't be changed. Maybe
Right.
English might get changed.
English is a full-year course, and in the past, the computer program would switch it over from semester to semester, and we've connected those for a year long.
Okay.
We do have one puzzle that we're going to be working on. That is that the Modern World History or freshman course that the team is going through curriculum review right now, and they are proposing to change that to a half-a-year course, and then the global issues to a full-year course. So that's something that we'll be working on with the teachers and Sandy as we move this forward. But in the first year, all 3 courses are year-long, and they would maintain the same teachers.
Okay.
Laura or Josh, maybe you could just review what would be the changes for freshmen compared to this year and next year.
So a freshman this year would have an identical schedule to a student next year. The only change would be that their English, science, and modern world history would be grouped together, and that their class, they would have, so the same 26 students between those 3 classes would be the same. For a student, that would be their change. Now, small things that could happen is that there'd be more collaboration between those classes. Their teachers may know them better. They may have an opportunity to work outside of the school walls more often, or have the times of the class be modified.
The other puzzle I should mention, related to what they take in their schedule, this year, it'll be the same as next year. For us, however, we have to make sure that a student who wants to take both band and choir can do that, and yet we're not funneling all of our music kids into 3 academies. So what we plan to do is take a look at where do most of our kids take that one single course. So we call those singletons. We want to try to avoid singletons as best we can, but we only have 1 period left. If we're using 1, 2, and 3 for AM academies and 5, 6, and 7 for PM, then one of our music classes will go 4th hour, and then some of our kids who want to take 2 music classes, those will be sprinkled across like the AM academies. Those who take 4th hour music, they may be also in the afternoon academy. So those are the other things we will solve as we go through. But elective area teachers had a concern that this may keep students from taking my classes. But as Josh mentioned, they'll take exactly the same courses that they take this year. Freshmen are pretty limited with their electives, but we still want to make sure that they can get world languages or music.
Mr. President?
Yes.
As far as staffing goes, from system that we have now to the system we're going to evolve to, does it change our numbers? Thank you.
Should answer that aloud.
Mr. President?
Yes.
Just another advantage for students, for 3 hours of the day, they stay in one place, basically. Will they have their lockers in this area as well?
We've been trying to locate their lockers near their advisories. One of the other things, if you know our schedule now, our advisory is between 2nd and 3rd hour, and we will plan to change that. It's likely to be right before 5th hour, and that will give us actually, we think, a 4th period for lunch, which means we won't have 600 in the lunchroom, we'll have only 450 in the lunchroom at one time. And that means that their locker would be near their advisory, which wouldn't interrupt either the morning or the afternoon academy.
I think you can see how much thought and work the high school, beyond these 2 individuals, have been putting into this to work through the details that really support students and their learning and transition into high school. But also there are pieces of it that help address for short term our space needs. And so that's an added bonus that just happened to happen as they worked through the details.
Other questions or comments? The action then we're taking tonight is to approve the Freshman Academy plan for 2013-14. So with that, then I'll entertain a motion.
Mr. President,
Mark.
I would move to implement the freshman academies for the 2013-2014 school year at the high school.
Motion by Mark. Is there a second?
A second.
Second by Pat. Any further discussion?
I just have one question. This sounds like a great plan. Will this help alleviate some of the space issues, the crowding in the halls, the crowding in the cafeteria, all of that?
With the changes in our schedule, so putting like 3 times 90 students in the West Wing, all first through third hour, and then also fifth through seventh hour. We
Okay.
believe that will help with passage in the hallways, reduced. And then also with moving the advisory to just before fifth hour, we plan to implement a 4th lunch period that's connected to the implementation of the freshman academies. So it will help with those 2 issues.
It's a great improvement. Thank you.
Yeah, it won't, it won't take care of the number of students in any one classroom at a time, but certainly it will help with some of our issues.
Thank you.
Yeah, it would, another thing to look at it as well is that it changes the center of mass. Because our 1 through 3 hours, sometimes those are sprinkled as study halls or preps, but those classrooms, every classroom would be in use in that area.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. President,
Yes.
just a clarification. We're not voting this evening on the change of the advisories.
No.
And that's coming later in the short-term plan.
Okay, thanks for that clarification. We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Good work,
Thanks for
thank
all the
you.
work on.
Thank you. All right, we're moving on to district goal, determining secondary space for learning, suggested long-term solutions for further study. Mary, and I think that I'll just preface this by kind of outlining a process I think we'd like to do this with. I think you all have a, what is that, a turquoise sheet? That, is that turquoise? Oh, it's
Whatever.
blue.
Just blue.
That describes briefly the different options that have been brought forward. So I'd like to suggest that we allow staff to walk through each of them in their entirety throughout. At that point in time, I would allow any citizens to speak to any of these options and get their thoughts specifically to these items or these options. And then I think we as a board could take each one at a time, discuss them, and vote on them individually as we move forward. Does that sound okay? Okay. And I imagine if there's any clarifying questions that you've got as we go through this, we certainly do that. Okay? Does that make sense? To anybody? Okay. It did to me when I thought of it. So, okay, we'll start with the option 1.
Well, I'm going to give some introductory comments first that kind of add on to what you said, Tom, and I'll invite our communications specialist, Tracy Habishaline, to join us. She'll be providing information on each of the options for you. We certainly, everyone around this table knows that we have a growing student population at the middle school and the high school, and that student population at each of the schools is larger than those current facilities can support. And as we look at our latest projections for enrollment that were done by experienced demographer Dr. Hazel Reinhardt in December 2010, those projections continue to climb. She identified what's called a projection band And with the economic downturn, we use the low numbers, the low kindergarten and the low migration numbers, which are now closest to our actual enrollment. So that's what you'll see on the graph, in two graphs, one for middle school and one for high school in front of you. We updated that graph. This is the same graphs that we have used during the St. Croix Meadows informational campaign or information that we provided for the referendum for St. Croix Meadows. And so we've updated those now, looking at this year, start at this year, and the actual enrollment. So demographers generally project about 10 years forward. And you can see that there are 8 years left from her December 2010 projections. So they go to 2020, 2021. Sounds really far out, but it's really coming. From her projections, we anticipate to continue well over capacity at both schools and getting worse over time. Sometimes when people have looked at that middle school graph and they see the downturn in the numbers in 2019, in 2020, they're concerned about that and they think maybe it's a bubble, but that's not what Dr. Reinhardt communicated to us. In fact, she said if we could extend that chart or those numbers, we would start to see that go back up. And what that represents is years during the worst part of the recession, 2008 and 2009, students that were born during those years. And there were lower birth rates at that time, and we've seen those birth rates come back up following that. So again, if we could extend the chart and had projections, it's very likely that they would go up, and that's what Dr. Reinhardt has said in response to that. As part of the community engagement process, the board invited the community to suggest potential solutions or options to consider to meet our long-term secondary space for learning needs. The community had through December 7th to submit options, and those options, along with the three final options that the facility task force had and identified in 2004 included, and solutions that came from the board work session in the end of October. So as President Tom talked about, the purpose this evening is to look at those options, narrow them for those that we're most interested in moving forward, so they are potentially promising, and moving them forward to further study. During this process, as those of you who've been through it before, the board will probably narrow options at various times based on additional information. So this is the first look at these options. And we expect when we move things forward that they will take further time, resources, and cost, and that's something that just to keep in mind as we move forward. The options have been compared, as you have the data, to Dr. Reinhardt's projections, and so Tracy's going to talk about each of those options. And because the information, this is just an initial look at these, each of those options are compared to the enrollment projections. And I'd have you turn to page 16, which is the criteria that the board approved for long-term secondary space for learning. And although some of the other bullets on this page could be considered in relationship to the information we have, there's two primary ones that I just point out as you think about this. And those are the first two bullets under enrollment. Address space requirements for grades 6 through 12 for the next 10 years with consideration given to future expandability. And then the second one, plan for each secondary grade level reaching enrollment of at least 550 students. So as you look at these numbers, those are two things that you can keep in mind in relationships to numbers. So our focus this evening is on these solutions and looking at them initially, there is not a lot of information, but we've provided information from Dr. Reinhardt's projections, as well as Tracy was on the facilities task force and can comment if you have questions about that, and there are some comments in the materials provided. So for reference, you have the board's criteria that we just looked at, and then you also have a one-page summary of all the options that the facilities task force review, and I believe, Tracy, correct me if I'm wrong, 37?
Correct.
37 options. So quite extensive in their work as well, and the time they took to review potential solutions. So with that being said, I'm going to turn it over to Tracy, and she's going to walk through each one of these options, and we'd entertain any questions that you have as we move forward.
Before I start on those individual charts, I do want to point out Dr. Reinhardt's projections did not include any new growth once the Stillwater Bridge goes in. So she was always very upfront with us that her numbers did not include any projections given that new structure. So that's something to keep in mind also when you look at that chart. So what we are presenting here are the low projected numbers, but it's safe to say that there would probably be additional growth because of that new bridge. Starting with option A, which is to construct a four-year high school and divide. So what you have here, what you'll see throughout this, the charts, any yellow is where you're constructing new space. And then the next two columns are dividing your current middle school population. This doesn't change configurations in any way. So you're constructing a four-year high school and dividing your middle school population between the current high school and the current middle school. So you're dividing into two middle schools. So what you have there for the numbers are the total middle school population divided equally in half, basically. And that could be adjusted depending on what you may use those other facilities for. For example, in the World Cafe conversations, people were talking about, are there ways that we partner with the community more? And so that may be something that you discuss in the future. It does allow for the administrative service center district offices to move back to the high school location. That was something that was always discussed by the board when they did purchase the current building that houses administration, that when additional space opened up, that site could be sold and moved back into the high school location. Okay.
Any questions? Okay, moving on. Oh, okay.
Yeah, I do have a question about the figures that are under the column that says construct four-year high school. As I looked at these and calculated the increase in students each year, it looks like you're going from 2012-13 to 2013-14 up 110 students. Is that?
These numbers are taken from Hazel Reinhardt's low projections.
Is that, have we typically seen that?
When I
year
went
over
through,
year?
prior to doing this, I went through and rolled up our current student population. So what we currently have in the district, and then taking half of our parochial students and adding that into it, these numbers are not significantly off if we roll up those numbers. So that was my first look at the numbers, was to roll up our actual numbers to see, are Hazel's numbers relatively close. And they are, obviously they're higher because she does include growth, which as a district we have always experienced growth at our various grade levels, so that would be consistent with what our experience is.
Okay, well, I looked at these trying to digest it all. The second year is you're going from 110 students in that first uptick to only 37 students the next year, and then up to 92, and then down to 40, and then in the fifth year, it's projecting a minus 17 enrollment. And then again, 31, 61, and 78 in the years after that. And as I'm looking at this, I got confused about how can you go up 110? Your projection is 110 from 2013 to 2014, and then in 17-18, you're projecting down 17 students.
All I can say is that Hazel uses a scientific process when she determines those projections, and I don't have any of those details behind, with me, behind how she determines each of those projections, but it does, as Mary said, it's considering low in-migration and low birth rates, and so there are a lot of data behind how she determines each of those projections. So I can't address specifically the changes, other than that is based on her research into our data.
And I'd like to add on to that, because there's some additional information. Dr. Reinhardt uses a cohort survival method, which is used by demographers around the country, as looking from one grade level to the next grade level and looking how many students survive as they move forward. And so it is different by grade level. It's moving the number that come in kindergarten, the birth rates and so forth, and putting those all together. And it's a mathematical formula that's used, and it is commonly accepted in the industry. The other thing that if Dr. Reinhardt was here, she would say, looking at this from year to year is not the way to look at these numbers. These are trends over time. So you're really going to look at, okay, look at the last year and how many students are there. And it might be exactly that, it might be less than that, but it's going to be in a range close to that based on her projections. And so that's what she would talk about. Looking at it from year to year isn't really the way to look at the numbers, because there's too many fluctuations.
Oh, I understand that. It just seemed like such a huge fluctuation in these figures that I thought I had to ask the question. I'm assuming that you probably have somewhere in a database somewhere what the enrollments have done, like say from the year 2000.
Correct.
Total district enrollments. Can you provide me with that information so that I can see how they've gone up each year? Total school?
Correct. And Hazel, in her report from 2010, provided a lot of that information in that report. I believe that was December 2010 when Hazel made her last report.
And we can make sure all the board members get another copy of that report. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think tracking some of what Sandy's asking about too is some of that, we have history with results from what Hazel Reinhardt has projected.
That's what I'm asking for. Thank you for that clarification.
Yeah. So I think that'd be helpful too. Okay. I guess we're moving on.
Option B?
Option B.
Option B is, again, construct a four-year high school. Your current high school would be converted into a grades 7 and 8, and the middle school converted into grades 5 and 6. And this was actually one of the final three options presented by the task force. This does change the elementary configuration a bit because it pulls your 5th grade out of elementary. And what you have there, again, are the projected numbers. And what you also have in the notes section are the reasons that the task force did not bring this particular option forward as their final recommendation, one being the change in the configuration at the elementary level, concern that 2,200 students is too large an enrollment for one building. It should be noted that at that particular time, as you heard about the high school Learning for the Future and the small learning communities that the district is moving forward with at this point, was not part of the discussion with the task force. Would need to consider creating houses for grades 7 and 8 in the current high school location, so moving 7 and 8 to that building, so just some concern about that and needing to give that consideration. Grades 7 and 8 in the current high school is not the best utilization of that building. The concern at that time was, if you look at the numbers in the current high school, it's somewhat underutilized for the size of the building. It does allow, however, the sale of the administrative service center and moving the staff back into the high school.
Any questions regarding B?
Option C, which is was the final recommendation made to the board in December of 2004 by the task force after reviewing all of those 37 options. And this option is to construct a 3-year high school, grades 10 through 12. Current high school is converted into a grade 8-9, and the current middle school converted to a 6-7. This option does allow for the sale of the Administrative Service Center and moving that back to the high school location.
Okay, go ahead.
I have a question again about the figures that you have in that first column. As I was digesting these, I noticed that the last year of 2019, 2019-20 to 2020-21, the difference in the projection for those 3 years is up 75 students. From 2021 to 2020, the last two figures there, the difference is 75 students, but that's for 3 years, three classes. But if you look at the first one that you did, the difference between those two numbers for 4 classes is only 78. So maybe you can explain to me why?
I think that reflects what Mary had said earlier. It is by grade level to grade level, so that
so most of the growth you're saying would be in the bottom three, in 10, 11, and 12?
that's where you see your difference. But I think what's important to note here, as Mary said earlier, is when you look from the start to the finish to see your...
I'm just trying to understand the figures.
Right.
And it seemed like there were only 3 students difference in the chart for 4 years to the chart for 3 years. So it doesn't make a lot of sense to me, but that's why I'm asking. I'm just trying to understand. Thank you.
Tracy R. Bryan, I was on the task force as well. The question that I had, this was the final recommendation by the task force, and it commented earlier that the option B, one of the reasons why it wasn't considered was because the current high school would be underutilized. There's a slight increase in utilization in option C over option B for the
Correct. I think what was a bigger issue for option B was a change in the configuration at the elementary level.
Okay.
Brian, if I'm wrong on that.
A long time ago.
Yes. But that was, there was significant discussion by the task force when we started to look at changing configuration at the elementary level. There was strong opposition to really changing that K-5 configuration. So I suspect that was a bigger issue than underutilization.
Yeah. There was some concern from a number of people around, putting 5th graders, just, kind of putting them in the middle school concept, I think that was, but I have a hard time telling you which one took greater weight right now.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I'm not disagreeing with.
Yeah, no, I just something that caught my eye.
Mm-hmm.
The 3-year school just was, provide us, provide the ability to expand, and so that was an important concept.
Yeah.
Versus a 4-year school right from the get-go.
Correct.
Okay, ready to move on?
Option D, which was another final 3 in the task force options. So this option is the construction of a new 8-9, expandable to a 9-12 per the task force. The current high school would be converted to a 10-12, and the current middle school would be converted to grade 6-7. As you can see from the numbers at the high school, the current high school 10-12 does not really allow additional space for the Administrative Service Center to be moved back to that space. The task force talked about at the point that 8-9 would be expanded to a 4-year, then consideration for moving the administrative offices would take place at that time. Comments from the task force, lower cost initially in constructing an 8-9, but knowing that you would need to expand at some point, concern over the higher cost overall with that option, concern about too many steps to get to what the final recommendation was ultimately. A similar proposal was defeated in the 2003 referendum, this configuration and construction of an 8-9. Preferred to build a high school now rather than waiting to convert it later. Very high cost related to converting, to the conversion of an 8-9 to a 9-12. These are all fairly similar. And then additional transportation and busing costs.
The costs were significant.
Yeah.
To go, to do this plan and then reconfigure for making the new 8-9 into a high school. And then all the domino effects from that, it kind of spoke against the idea of doing something that works for the community for the longer term. It was just, there's a lot of costs in the future that would have to be borne to, you know, the taxpayers have to bear, you know, in subsequent, I don't know if it's referendums or to reconfigure these schools and to add on.
Mr. President?
Yeah, Lynn.
Tracy, can you speak to why there'd be additional transportation or busing costs, or why that was on this one? I'm not sure I get that.
I just pulled all the notes from the task force of why this was verbatim from why the task force chose not to use this as one of their top 3. And so at that particular time, the task force believed that this option impacted busing more.
Pat.
Isn't this what was voted on a number of years back?
In 2003.
And we were
Correct.
going to build it out on the UU, so that would be the additional busing. Everybody would have to be bused out there. There wouldn't be any in town to walk. I'm just assuming
Could be.
that could be
Yep.
the.
Potentially, yes.
Okay, moving on. E.
Option E is construct a grade 6-7. So it's very similar. It's just starting lower. This came in, I believe I saw it in the World Cafe, and it also came in as an option on the website. So current high school converted to grades 10-12, current middle school converted to grades 8-9, and then construct grade 6-7 school. And this does not allow for the sale of the administrative service center or administrative offices.
Questions? No? Okay, moving on.
Option F, this was brought forward by Board Member Gerke, build a 612 school for 700 students, her suggestion, the STEM concept. And so what I did here is, the best way to do this would be to look at our current high school 912, current middle school 6-8, and then pulling out to reach 700 students at that new school. So that's what you see here, and then you have data for both the high school and middle school at what point that those red numbers are at the point that those buildings go over their current capacity. And just for notes, this option changes academic programming, and the enrollment to the 612 school would not be determined by attendance boundaries, that there would be some other methodology for determining enrollment, and again, does not allow for the sale of the administrative offices and moving those back to the high school.
Okay.
These overages are based upon the projections that you're making, or that Hazel Reinhardt made.
Correct.
And if you assume those are correct, but I am already questioning whether those are accurate. So I'm questioning whether these red figures here would be accurate too. Thank you.
Okay.
Mr. President?
Yep, Lynn.
And just to point out, I think it's obvious, but it's 100 per class for
Correct.
each 6, 7,
Correct.
8, 9, 10, 11, and 12.
Correct. So I took the projected numbers for the high school, subtracted 400, and the projected numbers at the middle school and subtracted 300.
And then wouldn't transportation be a higher cost in this option as well? Because if students in that system were going to attend or participate in band or orchestra or any of those other...
Potentially. That's the comment about programming.
Okay.
There would be a change in programming. So those would be items that needed to be discussed further if if the board wants that researched further.
I'm not sure we want to drive into this thing too much, but one question I would have too is there any best practices on how you would select who goes to that school? You know, it's the new school, it's got the special programming. Wouldn't like every student want to go to that school?
Well,
I'm just trying to understand what's the
there's
best
a lot
practice.
of information around this
Yeah.
that we need to, if this moves forward, that we need to revisit.
Yeah.
Certainly, that would be
So I just
one
know
issue.
we changed boundaries for elementary school, and the amount of public dialogue and just the amount of emotion, just changing a few streets, was an amazing amount of work. I'm just trying to think of, is there a best practice you do something like this, so that, you know, you minimize that? And
It depends on how this is really developed, Brian. And then, Tracy, I'm wondering about the task force, and I may not remember this correctly, so I thought there was some conversation about not wanting two high schools, not wanting two schools at a level, maybe middle school, I don't know. Was there some conversation about that?
There was conversation about high school and not
Okay.
wanting to divide the community into two separate high schools.
But not something like this.
Right, but it would be, okay. Yep.
Probably the piece that would be most similar to a discussion by the task force was the task force consistently supported instructional equity across schools. So, Brian, I don't know if you remember that as we went from, primarily at the elementary level, when we looked at different schools, and there were some differences in programming, and the importance of making sure that all students had access to the same programming. So that was a discussion by the task force.
The one thing that I would just clarify on all of these, we didn't go to pros and cons on them. You know, this is just an initial look. It's about numbers. It's about, did the task force have any specific information that relates to this? So again, we're looking at doing that down the road.
Certainly.
To answer Brian's question, a lot of the schools around the country that do this type of thing, the children going there are done by lottery. It doesn't become a gifted and talented school. It doesn't become a school that attracts only certain people. It's usually done by lottery. You can check. I mean, there's lots and lots of information online. And I don't know if any of you saw the article in this, the news that we got from WASB. I think this comes from WASB, doesn't it?
Yes.
Okay, there's a great article in here about a school in Fond du Lac, a STEM school in Fond du Lac that they just did. It's a wonderful article. So, you know, you can just go and check it out. There's all kinds of information online about this, but usually it's done by lottery.
Sandy, a question about that. The lotteries that I knew of are usually, and maybe that's not the ones you're talking about, but just a question. Usually you make an application and then they pull from those applications. So is
It can be
that
done
what?
that way. There's
Okay.
other ways to do it too, but it can be done that way.
Okay,
Okay.
moving on.
Option G.
Well, I guess we have.
Oh, sorry.
I have a question here that I probably should have asked in the very beginning. We're at capacity over capacity at the middle school and the high school. No matter what we put in there, I guess I would like to have the numbers of what the capacity for the high school is.
The current high school capacity is 1,680.
That's, okay, that's what it is, and that's what it, I mean, we
Current-
just
our
reached it.
Current high school is 1,680.
Okay, that's what we have in there now? Are we over?
Right, we're at about,
Okay.
yep,
And we're right at it now?
correct.
Okay, and the middle school?
1,125.
Now, I just want to, again, clarify, at the high school, we have the seats for students, but we don't have our common areas like the media center, the cafeteria, the circulation, our physical education space, many other spaces. We don't have the space to meet the educational needs of students, and those common areas were not built for the size of high school we currently have. So it's what we call limited capacity.
Okay, moving on.
Okay, option G is to construct a new elementary school K-5 to relocate Hudson Prairie Elementary students. So then you can do this next conversion. So current high school converted to 10-12, current middle school converted to an 8-9, and your current Hudson Prairie Elementary converted to grades 6-7. This would require additions to Hudson Prairie Elementary for middle school grade 6-7 program and seats. So as Mary just said, the numbers that I'm putting here are with respect to seats, but programming is impacted when you look at some of these options. You can see with the Hudson Prairie Elementary, there's some significant numbers over what that capacity is. Hudson Prairie's capacity is 588 students. And obviously does not allow for the sale of the Administrative Service Offices Center.
But just reinforcing, Hudson Prairie at 588, you can't take 588 middle school students and put them in there without additions because of the program being different.
Option H, again, construct an elementary school K-5 to relocate your Hudson Prairie Elementary students. Current high school converted to a grades 6-8. Converted to grade. And current middle school in Hudson Prairie converted to 9-12. So it's flip-flopping. So there would be, it would require additions to the current middle school to support your high school educational program. Again, does not support the sale of the Administrative Service Offices, Service Center offices. Okay?
Okay.
Option I, additions to the middle school and high school, without knowing what those additions would entail. So what I've just moved forward are the projections and where we're at as far as capacity and overcapacity. Just as additional notes, the task force did look at both of these options and did not choose to move forward with these as recommendations. For one, the high school would need to acquire additional land, and the task force did not support acquisition of land through eminent domain. Challenges of maintaining school operations during the construction and renovation that would have to occur, and to the extent that they would need to occur, eliminates parking, eliminates green space. A larger, more crowded campus would not be neighborhood friendly. Traffic congestion and parking would be worse, especially on-site and on surrounding streets. And again, no space for the administrative offices.
Yeah, Brian.
Yeah, and one other comment that came up, I do remember this, was just we've talked about this before, just like kind of the core space. It's really hard, it's really expensive to expand. It's almost a non-starter to expand that. You know, a bigger cafeteria, bigger hallways. It's kind of the core part of the school. And that's you can add on wings of classrooms. You can't it's really hard to add a new cafeteria or add new hallways. And,
or widen existing hallways.
it just becomes cost prohibitive, you know, and you're almost better off, you know, basically starting over than try to gut the whole thing out and reconfigure the whole building from an empty shell.
Okay, option J, additions to the existing high school. So add on to current high school, so grades 9-12 staying the same, current middle school grades 6-8 expand into Hudson Prairie. Hudson Prairie students, their boundaries are adjusted, so then you spread the Hudson Prairie student population out across the district. So this does not include construction of a new elementary school. So it's add on to the high school. Middle school expands into Hudson Prairie. Hudson Prairie students' boundaries are redrawn, and they attend the other remaining 5 elementary schools. You can see the capacities for our other schools, elementary schools, to take on that many students.
Can I?
Sure.
No,
You said
I
what the
did not
capacity was, capacity is 558 or 588?
No, I didn't do, but currently Hudson Prairie is at 491.
Okay. That's current, and we have seats there for 588, correct?
Correct.
All right, thank you.
Oh, wait, no, that is
no?
not correct,
That's not-
because the middle school has 3 of those classrooms.
That school's full.
So
Okay.
Hudson Prairie,
We capped it.
right, so when I'm calculating Hudson Prairie's capacity here at 588,
That includes the ones that.
right,
middle
because
school is
I'm
occupied.
starting without, just with the bare numbers. But currently, Hudson Prairie is below that 588 because 3 of their classrooms are used by the middle school.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry. Okay, where are we at? Option K, add on to the high school and convert to grades 8 through 12. So current middle school is converted into grades 6 through 7. Again, does not allow for movement of the administrative offices. Option L, remove 12th grade from the high school and teach this grade through virtual school or online. Students would not have actual seat time at the high school. And so what you have here are the numbers if we remove the 12th grade class. This option does change academic programming. It obviously doesn't allow for administrative offices to be moved back. And because this option impacts programming and how the district serves students with special needs, Corey and Sandy have additional information about online programming.
I'm just going to speak a little bit to the programming. It would just be to realize if they are out for the entire day, that would mean especially electives. Students would not then be taking choir, band, orchestra, ceramics, painting, things like our PLTW engineering classes. Those aren't available online. So it's just to know that student programming would be greatly impacted at the 12th grade.
I can just add that we have a set of legal requirements around serving students with disabilities, and there is a requirement to make available a range of service, location, and building options for students with disabilities. And when we try to educate them to the maximum extent appropriate with their non-disabled peers, and decisions cannot be made based on things like availability of space and modifications to the general program. So we'd be really challenged by making sure we had a continuum of options based, and those decisions have to be made on an individual case-by-case basis. They cannot be predetermined for groups of students.
And then the other piece would just be to think about too, when you hear the word just online, we probably have different definitions, because of course we want all students who have experiences researching online, doing work online, and so on. And so the district really is supporting more of a blended learning environment for all kids so that they have some face-to-face time as well as opportunities online. So it's just to make clear that we want students to do online opportunities. It's just not 100% of their day. It's not something we may want to consider for the entire day.
Sandy, in regard to AP classes, are all of those that we currently offer online, and then also dual credit that with the technical colleges that we've been moving forward with, would that be available for students or not?
When I looked at our current vendor today with the Wisconsin Virtual School, they do have quite a plethora of AP courses. They have, though, only Calculus AB. They don't do the BC that many of our students pursue. They don't have AP German, which we do offer on site. So there are some AP available online, but not the whole options that many of our students pursue. And then the transcripted credit, not existent. I mean, that has to be something that replicates what goes on in our technical schools, again, on our campus. And most of those are classes like electricity, construction, machine tools, some of our family consumer science classes.
This is an option that's currently available to students to take online courses now. Sandy, do you recall, because I don't have it in front of me, the number of our students?
When we started in fall 2010, we had 45 students, and then the spring of that same year, it went down to 26. Then fall of 2011, 32 students sought online options, and this is taking like 1 or 2 classes as juniors or seniors. Spring 2012, we were down to 12, and now this year we're back up to 44. So they have had the choice of taking online, and that's what we've been seeing as numbers.
Can I add to the consideration of open enrollment issues that may come from that as well? Many districts use the online piece to attract students if they're losing enrollment as a way to boost enrollment. We don't have that problem. So we may inadvertently be attracting others, and if we have spaces, we may have to make those available to students who would be looking to come in. So those are just things we need to work out. You know, as far as open enrollment out, the last 2 years, we've ranged anywhere from 25 to around a little over 30 students per year, at least applying out. Not all of them actually go. Many of them do choose to stay in. So just some additional numbers for your consideration.
Enrolling out into online.
Open enrolling out into online options, yep.
And Corey, just a clarification, I know Diane wasn't here with the numbers this afternoon, so we couldn't check with her, but some of those students are students who've never attended in the Hudson School District before they went online. So it wasn't really releasing space just because they open enrolled out
Great
for
point.
some of them.
They might be homeschooled.
Okay.
Yep, thank you.
Mr. President?
Yeah, Lou.
Are there graduation requirements that need to be met in 12th grade that can't be met online outside of what Corey talked about for special education? I mean, aren't there gym requirements and other requirements where they need to physically be in the space?
I did propose the question to DPI, and they were not able to get back to me before the board meeting, but just talking about compulsory attendance questions or graduation requirements, just what our options would be for 100% of our students to be online. But that is a question that if this goes forward, we'd have to check into further.
Okay. Option M would be for the district to reach out to underutilized area school districts to provide temporary relief. So one of the suggestions with this was to bus Hudson students to our extra students to River Falls. It's basically open enrollment. Option N, I didn't do the projections just because this starts to go off in several different directions, and it became a little bit difficult to give you projections. So how this option starts is you expand the middle school into Hudson Prairie. Hudson Prairie students are moved to Rivercrest or the high school, and then the high school becomes an elementary for both Hudson Prairie and Willow River students, and Willow River is then closed. Or you add on to EP Rock, but in the end build a new high school or convert Hudson Prairie and the middle school into a high school. And if you can come up with the exact flow on that, then we can figure out the projections, but that one was a little bit hard depending on how you would go with that. Option O is to construct a K-12 charter school. I did not apply projections to this because I don't know what the size of that school would necessarily be. This would be a change in academic programming. Charter schools are generally are not typically started as a means to address space needs, but rather program needs. And as I said earlier, the task force consistently supported instructional equity across our schools. So that would be a shift in the district's philosophy in how we educate all students or provide similar programming to all students. The final piece are just location suggestions that came in on the website and also through the community conversations for the board to consider, but not part of tonight's discussion, but just so that you have that information.
So that concludes the descriptions, and I don't believe that there are any citizens' requests to speak about any of these. Okay, so then thinking about this in terms of a process, I think we might be able to move through some of these pretty quickly. And, but I guess I'll also mention something that Mary mentioned before, and that is that we want to remember that we're not trying to make decisions tonight. We're trying to decide decisions on which ones we want to go with. What we want to do, and I'm not explaining myself very well, is to just identify which ones we want more information on, and which have possibilities, that still have feasibilities that we could consider. But in doing so, it's going to take time and cost and so forth, so we want to take that into consideration as well. So my suggestion is that we go through these one by one, and if there is a board, we can have discussion about any one of them, and if there's a board member who wants to make a motion to move it forward, then let's make that motion instead of a motion to oppose it, so to speak, so that we just move the ones we believe have viability forward, and we're voting that way. Does that make sense?
I think so.
Does that make sense? Okay.
Go through each individually.
Each one individually, I think, but we're having discussion about each one, and we're just saying, I would make a motion to move this one forward, and then we'd vote,
All votes for those?
if that's your request.
Please, thank you.
Sure, for each one. Okay. Okay, so option A. Any discussion or a motion?
Mr. President, I move to forward option A for consideration by the board.
Okay, is there a second? Second to option A? Pat, second? So any other further discussion on option A? Okay. We'll do a roll call vote, starting with Pat.
German, yes.
Kaisershot, no.
Robson, yes.
Holland, aye.
Gerke, no.
Bell, no.
So that was, you count this up, it's tied. Oh, wonderful.
Flip
I
a
knew
coin?
we'd miss Dan eventually.
Where's Dan?
does-
I don't know how to break a tie.
I think
We're
I thought a
just
motion
looking at
fails
this.
without it, doesn't it? Or is that not my Robert's rules?
Right, Mark, according to Robert's rules, I believe the motion fails if it's a tie and there's no tiebreaker, I believe.
I thought.
Okay. We'll assume that, and if it's different, then we'll have to revisit it, I suppose. So it's a no. Okay. Option B. Any motion to move that forward?
Mr. President,
Yes, Brian.
I'd like to move to option B forward.
Okay, construct a four-year high school, convert high school currently to 7-8.
I second it.
Okay, second by Lynn. Any other discussion on option B?
Okay, I guess I would like to have a little discussion on that. This is just to be able to discuss it and go forward and look at it, so,
Further study, that's right.
yeah, for the study. So I would encourage a yes on this, so we can talk about it.
Okay, any other discussion?
My only
Okay.
other discussion was, it was a finalist from the task force back in 2004. That's why I'm making the
Okay.
motion.
All right. I guess we're ready for roll call. Pat, we'll start with you again.
German, yes.
Kaisershot, aye.
Robson, I.
Holland, aye.
Gerke, no.
Bell, aye.
That one passes. It's a yes, okay. My math didn't fail me there. All right, option C,
Mr. President,
yes.
move to support getting more information on option C.
Second.
Okay, motion and a second. Any other discussion? Okay, Pat?
German, yes.
Kaisershot, aye.
Robson, I.
Holland, aye.
Gerke, no.
Bell, aye.
Motion, that passes and moves forward. Option D,
Mr. President, move to option D to recommend getting more information.
okay. Is there a second?
I second.
Second by Pat. Any other discussion regarding option D? Okay. Pat?
German, yes.
Kaisershot, no.
Robson, no.
Holland, no.
Gerke,
Bell,
no.
aye. That one failed. So,
I'm done.
option E. Instruct grade school 6 to 7, current high school grade 10 to 12, middle school 8 to 9. Is there a motion to move that forward?
I'll make a motion to move that forward, just to get information on it.
Okay. Motion to move E forward. Is there a second?
It's option E.
Yep, option E. Is there a second? Is there a second? No second, so with that one will fail. E is no. Option F. Is there a motion or option F to move?
I'll make a motion to move that forward to get more information on it.
Okay.
Second.
Motion by, and a motion and a second. Is there any other discussion on option F? Discussion? Nope. Okay, Pat?
German, no.
Kaisershot, no.
Robson, aye.
Holland, aye.
Gerke, aye.
Bell, aye.
That one passes.
4-0.
All right. Option G. Motion to move that one forward. Okay. No motion. Fails. Option H. Motion to move that one forward. Nope. So that one fails. H fails. Option I. 1001, 1002.
I'd make a motion to move that one forward to get more information on the possibilities of being able to add on to both.
Okay. Is there a second?
Is this option I?
Aye. Second? Not hearing a second, so the motion fails. Option J. Motion to move J forward. Hearing none, it fails. Option K. Move K forward. Is there a motion? Hearing none, the motion fails, that option fails. L. Motion to move L forward. No motion, fails. Option M. Motion to move M forward. Fails. Option N. Motion to move N forward. Okay, fails. Option O, last one. With no motion, that fails. So we have three options moving forward, as I count it. Option B, option C, and option F. Okay. All right.
Can I ask a question?
Certainly.
When the Citizens Committee gets done with their advisory work, will this change at all, or can they bring new ideas to the board? Or will they be instructed to work on these three ideas?
Well, I I don't want to speak for the rest of the board, but my personal feeling is that if there are other options that we're not thinking of, that I think we would want to consider it within a certain period of time.
All right, great, thank you.
Okay, where are we now?
Do we end up with 3?
We have completed B. Now we're on to C, 2013-14 high school courses. Sandy.
To achieve our district vision of preparing each student for post-secondary success, we want to ensure all students have access to challenging, relevant curriculum. We also want to be proactive at this time in anticipation of Common Core state standards, new state assessments, and increased graduation requirements. We are working under the assumption that when the legislature goes back into session, that high school graduation requirements in math and science will increase to 3 credits of each from the current requirement of 2. The majority of Hudson High School graduates recognize the importance of those subjects and already take 3 or more credits of math and science. 2 of our new course proposals tonight provide additional options to students to both meet the anticipated new requirements and continue with increased studies in math and science. The next slide. Our first proposal is a food science class. The Family and Consumer Science Department, in collaboration with the Science Department, conducted what is referred to as a crosswalk of the curriculum and submitted it to DPI for approval after going through the Learning and Program Development Committee. It was approved, which means the course contains enough science content for the district to offer to students as a science elective. Students will study science concepts through the lens of food and food preparation, things like sanitation procedures, chemical changes, and food preservation, to name a few. Next slide. The second new course proposal is intermediate mathematics. Again, in preparation for increased requirements, as well as anticipation of the new high school academies, we want a rigorous option for students that provides in-depth learning on core algebra and geometry concepts, incorporates real-world application, and meets the new Common Core math standards. Again, we want all students to be ready for post-secondary success, and that means keeping them in mathematics through Algebra 2 or beyond. The final course for this evening is Varsity Orchestra. Believe it or not, we are now in our 8th year of orchestra. So the student numbers continue to increase, and especially now at the high school, we have 40 8th graders currently in the program, and from track record, we know that nearly 100% of them will roll up to the high school program. So there is a need now to add a second performance group at the high school. The addition will require purchase of some instruments and storage units, but this will be incorporated into the Learning Services curriculum budget. The approval this evening indicates that the courses will be incorporated into this year's course description booklet. After registration, staffing needs will follow the prioritization and budget process. The courses presented this evening were reviewed at the last Learning and Program Development Committee meeting. Thank you. If you have any questions.
Were they recommended by the Learning and...
That's affirmative.
Okay, thank you. Okay.
We can read mine.
Any other questions or comments about? I'll entertain a motion to accept the 2013-14 high school courses as laid out.
Mr. President, so moved.
Motion by Mark, a second.
Second. Oh, sorry, Sandy, go ahead.
Second.
Second by Sandy. Any other discussion? All in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Thank you. 2012-13 collective bargaining agreement with WCEA, Hudson Teachers Union. Nancy.
Okay. The administration is asking for the board's approval of the 2012-2013 negotiated professional agreement between the West Central Education Association Teachers Union and the School District of Hudson. The administration met twice with the full board to receive direction before reaching a tentative agreement with teacher negotiators on November 28th. Tim Erickson and I represented the board to reach the agreement. The lead negotiators for the teachers were Brian Huser and Tess Rizzardi. Other members of the teacher negotiating team were Katie Murphy, Amy Davis, and Dan Murray. On December 4, the Personnel Committee of the board reviewed and discussed the tentative agreement. The board of the regional UNISERV approved the agreement this past weekend. And the Hudson teachers voted today and approved the agreement. The agreement provides each teacher a 2.66% total salary increase for 2012-2013, and Tim will interpret this increase for you further.
All right, thank you. I'm going to just draw your attention to Article 3, and that's where we get into the dollars and cents of the agreement. What we have is we have under Act 10 and the Employee Relations Commission Rule 90, we're required to cost out and calculate what an increase is under base wages. And so you'll note that it's 3.16% on base wages. That's a special calculation. And that's how we arrive at a dollar amount of $490,000. What that really means, though, is in the second paragraph. If you see under that third line, the total increase in salary is 2.66% for each individual teacher. So on their on their salary, they'll receive 2.66%. And that, when we look at that, that is under the CPI. The CPI actually for that, as it's again laid out under Act 10 and the Employee Relations Commission, is a 3.16, and that's the Consumer Price Index, so the inflationary measure. And so we're at 2.66, so that's under that inflationary measure. And so we'll just open it up if you have any additional questions.
Nancy or Tim, did you talk about new teachers and how that will work? I know that's not part of this agreement, but just to clarify for the board.
It is referenced under other compensation information at the very end of the agreement. Historically, through negotiations, we have provided for the similar increase for teachers who are new to the district in their first year. And that is provided for in a separate clause of the agreement as consistent with past practice. And I don't know, Tim, if you want to expand on that, 34,600 or?
Sure. Yeah, it's just, again, it's a departure from, because of the changes in law, it's a departure from what we used to do in the past. So we have to address new employees, new this year, separately. And the most efficient way to do this is to address it in one agreement under the other compensation information. So if you take the 490,403 and add the 34,600, that's the total cost of the agreement. So 525,000.
Right. Mr. President, just a question. How about any, I thought we had some stipends or for postgraduate work or something like that in the current agreement with the teachers? Is that?
That provision is in the handbook now, and it's called compensation for educational advancement. There is essentially no lane movement any longer, and there is no step increase for a year of experience. Those two pieces are gone because the grid is gone, but the educational advancement is addressed through benchmark. We had over 60 teachers make educational advancement and were awarded compensation in a total amount of, Tim, total amount for that?
It's approximately $225,000.
Is that outside of this?
That's right, that's outside. Again, if we look at under the new landscape with the new law, we only bargain base wages.
Okay,
So
but my point
everything
is,
else
some
sells
teachers
it.
will be making will receive more compensation because of the provisions in the handbook, other than this.
Right, yeah, and again, as Nancy mentioned, we don't have step
Right.
increases, we don't recognize that anymore. There's no compensation for step increases.
But it's a significant amount of money. I mean, it's, what'd you say it was for the,
About somewhere around 225,
Yeah.
235,000.
all right, thanks.
Was this reviewed by committee, by finance committee?
No, I just think it wasn't in the finance committee. Oh, excuse me, I'm not sure it was on the finance committee.
Wasn't in any other committee, personnel or anything?
Personnel. Was it personnel?
So what was the discussion of personnel?
Personnel Committee endorsed the agreement.
Except this member of the Personnel Committee.
Okay.
Well, yeah, the Personnel Committee, that's,
As a whole?
as a whole,
Okay.
endorsed it.
One.
so.
Right.
Okay. Any other questions, comments? All right, we'll entertain a motion.
Mr. President, I'll move that the board accept the 2012-13 collective bargaining agreement with WCEA Hudson Teachers Union.
Second?
Second.
Second, there's a motion and a second. Any other further discussion?
Roll call vote, please.
Okay, we'll do a roll call vote. Pat?
German, yes.
Kaiser aye.
Robson, I.
Holland, aye.
Gerke, no.
Bell, aye.
Motion passes. Thank you. Moving on then to auditorium site technician and supervisor proposal. Nancy?
The administration asks for your approval for the hiring of an auditorium site technician and supervisor pursuant to the details in the proposal. This position would be funded by user fees through community services and not by the general fund or through the tax levy. A position like this has been under consideration for a number of years. And the district undertook a study last spring of the high school auditorium, which included an analysis of internal and external use, an equipment inventory, and a problem log review. And although not specifically included in the study, the Willow River Lee Auditorium has presented some of the same concerns and challenges. On December 4, the Personnel Committee of the Board reviewed and discussed the study and the proposal and endorsed its consideration by the full board this evening.
Okay. Any questions regarding this proposal? Entertain a motion?
One question.
Okay.
The community service funding, I know that's a separate fund. Is this really coming through the revenues of the auditorium itself, or is it just through the community fund balance, community fund budget?
There are
Right.
user fees for community
Time is it?
service.
It's 9:10.
So,
I got my spokesman, Sandy Gerke, restate my question. The question was it coming from user fees from the auditorium, or was it coming from from that fund?
No, community services as a
Right.
whole.
yeah,
I understand.
Do you
the
have a
question.
question, Mr. Bell?
it'll be paid for, because community service charges fees, it'll be paid for on the balance with those fees. There are other fees we're in the process and have been examining right now, where we may be shifting some of those fees over to the fee revenue over to the general fund. We haven't made a final determination on that yet.
Yep. Thank you.
Okay, does that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay.
Mr. President.
Yes, Lynn.
I move to approve the auditorium site technician supervisor position as presented.
Okay, we have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. Is there any other discussion? All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Thank you. appoint deputy clerk for spring 2013 school board election. Mary.
Mr. President and board members, every year at this time, we identify a deputy clerk, and I would recommend to you that Tim Erickson serve in this role with support from Diane Radel, executive assistant.
So moved.
Motion and
I second.
a second. Motion by Brian, second by Pat. I don't know if you guys are getting all that. Any other discussion? Okay. All in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thank you. Contract with AT&R for high school facility assessment. Tim.
Okay, the contract with AT&R for the high school facility assessment is in front of you, and this is going to look at several different areas of the high school plant. And so if you, I would call your attention to page 2 of the document, and a list of different building components such as the exterior, the building envelope, fixed equipment, heating, ventilation, and air conditioning. It will look at electrical and the site. And what it will do is the study will involve calculating the remaining useful life of many of these pieces, determine replacement costs, life cycle costs, and also look at are there any changes that can be made that would where we'd obtain a benefit from a savings payback on energy efficiencies. This helps develop a base of knowledge of our high school campus that can be used going forward for the long-term space for learning, capital planning. It will actually serve many different needs. This contract was reviewed by the Finance Committee and was approved. And if you look at the cost is $13,000, a not to exceed cost of $13,000 plus reimbursable expenses.
I'll also note that the Facilities Committee also discussed this as well, and without the numbers, approved the action anyway.
That's right, yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yep, certainly.
Is this the kind of, you have to bid out for this kind of thing? Did you accept bids for this type of work from other companies, or is this the only company that bid on it?
What we did is we asked for proposals.
Okay.
And they're for professional services. Professional services are not required to be bid out.
I see, okay.
But we had about 6 different firms submit proposals, and actually this fee was in line, if not somewhat lower than some of the others.
So how do you choose somebody like this, then, a company like this, to do this kind of work? Is it based upon what they're going to do? It's not based upon just the price, because it's not a bid, correct?
That's right, yeah. No, not based on just the price. Price is a consideration, but we're looking at the various backgrounds and expertise of the firms involved, how long they've been doing it. Do they do this particular thing for school districts? How familiar are they with school districts? And so we look at a number of different things. We look at their response to the proposal. Did they answer all of the questions that we had? So there's several different aspects that we look at when we go through each one of those proposals.
Okay. I'm just trying to get in my head how this type of company is chosen for this kind of work.
Sure.
Because I'm sure in the next couple of years I'll see it again.
Yeah, you
So
bet.
thank you.
You bet. Sure.
I'll entertain a motion.
Move to approve.
Motion by Brian. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Sandy. Any other discussion? All in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thank you. So I'll accept a motion to approve the consent items with a specific reading or regarding the expenditures.
Mr. President, I move to approve the consent items and that the Director of Financial Services be authorized to pay bills in the amount of $1,572,590.26.
Okay, motion?
Second.
And second. Motion by Lynn, second by Brian. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thank you. Down to superintendent's report. Oh, What did I miss?
We just did them.
We just did it.
Yes.
See how fun these are, Nancy?
I'm so glad. Nancy, thank
Speed of
you.
light, Sandy.
Nancy, you're just doing that to be kind. Since I'm usually the one that misses these items.
This is fast
That's just being nice, you know? Okay, so number 8, superintendent's report.
And we're going to talk about Nancy Sweet and those consent items that you just approved. And with mixed emotions, I talk about this. The board just approved the retirement of District Deputy Director and Human Resource Director Nancy Sweet, effective June 30th, 2013. Actually, I wrote 2012, but good thing it's not then. Certainly, Nancy is a humble individual, doesn't like the spotlight, and of course, you would all know that she told me that I shouldn't say very much at this point. So you are all familiar with a small sample of her work. And as I thought about what I was going to say, you know, I had to try to balance honoring someone who certainly deserves it and has contributed beyond measure to the district, and also her wishes. So I'll try to do that here. Nancy received her undergraduate and master's at UW-Eau Claire as a school psychologist. And I'm going to just move on to Hudson history, the 30 years of history she has served and contributed to the Hudson School District. She started in 1984, and she worked part-time that year. 82? Diane told me 84. That wouldn't make sense with 30 years, would it? I'm sorry, Diane, take that back. Okay, anyway, that's what this sheet says. So, my fault. Designee of special education. So essentially, she was the director of special education in 2 districts, 50% in Hudson and 50% in River Falls. And then she moved on. And Nancy, what year was that?
It's good personal, isn't it?
Okay, 83, 84. She decided to work and certainly was asked to work 100% in Hudson at that time. And she also, sometime after that, was the principal of 4th Street School. So she's had that experience as well. Just continues on. So then she became the director of special services, student services. But the focus was on students with disabilities at that time. And then that role was expanded to director of pupil services. So she took on a lot more responsibility at that time. In 2006-07, or close, thereabouts, she became the deputy director, and eventually we changed that to district deputy director, and the director of student services. And then she moved to human resources and kept that title of district deputy director, which she has both of those titles at the present time. And it's 30 years, even though my calculations weren't quite right there. So, you know, it would take me a long time to talk about all the contributions to the district, certainly, and the many things that she has started, expanded, developed, made better, brought in best practices. So I'll hit a couple, and I'll have more opportunities to do this and expand on this. So when I talked to Nancy about our special ed program when she walked into the district, it was essentially a very small program, and it was for students with learning disabilities. And so you're all familiar with our special ed program now, and certainly Nancy had the hand in developing that to a model program. And it serves many students, and yet Corey talked about those results as well. So how it's been set up has been a model for the state, and certainly something to be proud of when we think of our early childhood program that's just recognized again this evening, and all of the good news and good things in our programs for students with disabilities and serving them. And Nancy's hand in that is just instrumental in the program we have today. Under her leadership in pupil services, her impact grew beyond special education into counseling, school psychology, gifted and talent nursing services, student health and wellness, AODA, and so much more. Along with retired Superintendent Ron Berth, she developed and perfected the pre-expulsion process that gives students a second chance, and you are all familiar with that, and she has had a great hand in that for many years. And we still use that program today, even though Nancy now takes the substitute role in that program, but that program really is hers, and we still use it as it is. She is the resident expert in the district on board policies and legal issues. Under her leadership, the Human Resource Department has transformed to a contemporary best practice department aligned with HSD 2025, while still delivering that personal touch and relationship building to employees. She is a unique and talented educational leader whose contributions have mattered greatly to students, staff, and families. And if we think of how many staff with what she's done in special ed and pupil services, student services, and also as HR director, how many she's had hand in hiring in this district, it's more than anybody else I can think of. Her organizational history and story just can't be replicated anyplace by any of us. And it's fun to hear those stories and the humor that she contributes to them. She has the unique ability and finesse to tell someone the hard truth and still make them feel valued and supported. She's highly, and that includes me at times, she's highly respected by all and loved by most. Stop that. Loved by most. Her calm, thorough, conscientious manner is valued by everyone who works with her. She is a wise, courageous leader who other leaders turn to for advice, direction, and counsel. Certainly a stabilizing force. When I came to the district, Nancy was the person I could go to from the very first to tell me like it was, and she still continues to do that today. Her 30-year legacy will live on in the district's program services and all the lives she has touched in her numerous roles, and I'm blessed to learn and lead with her. So Nancy, I will stop here knowing that there is still time between now and June 30th and multiple opportunities to honor you, and thank you for your service and 30 years of contribution. Just...
Oh, funny. Okay. This is my response right here.
Okay, but I'm not done yet. So just know I'm not done yet, and there's more to come.
Oh, yeah. Mr. President and members of the board, I've been delaying my retirement for years. Now, just to avoid this type of fuss. And it's way too early for thank yous and goodbyes. However, I thought I might tell a few funny and for real Hudson Board of Education stories, but decided against it. Maybe later. As I stated in my letter, if I was just starting my career, Hudson is where I would want to be, for many reasons, but not in any small measure because of outstanding board members like you. It's a continuing privilege to work with you. That's it.
Come on, it's gotta be.
No, it's it.
Well, I have to say that it's just been an honor to to work with Nancy. Actually, Nancy and I worked a little bit together when I was with the YMCA, and we did some collaborative things together. And just a steady, rock-solid, kind heart, wonderful person. Even though you are a Notre Dame fan, that's okay. That's all right. When I asked Nancy what she was going to do now in retirement, she said she's going to watch football with her Aunt Bee. And I know which team she's going to be watching. So.
They got a big game coming up, too.
They do, so.
Mr. President, if I could
Yes,
just,
Mark.
very briefly, Nancy, you're the consummate professional and one of the finest individuals I've had the privilege to work with. You will be greatly missed.
I just can't stand this, really.
It's as short as I could make it.
We're going to try our hardest to make you cry. Yeah. Good for you. Okay.
Oh, thank you. I did hear individually from several of you, and I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And as Mary said, we'll have more opportunities.
Oh, yes, and I will too.
Good. So good thinking, right.
I just want to make one comment. You haven't lived unless you did a road trip with Mary and Nancy driving to Madison for a convention. It was quite a trip. I learned more about the Hudson School District and this community in that 4 hours.
I bet. Yeah.
So I'm going to do another one with you, Nancy, even if you're not a member of the Hudson School District.
It was the Hudson School District's version of the Griswold family vacation.
Oh no.
It's a whole different demeanor in the van, isn't it? Yeah. Okay, so let's move on to 2013-14 Leadership Transition Planning.
So it's a little strange to move from honoring Nancy and then moving right into transitioning planning as we think about the process for candidate selection. But that happens to be the next question that people ask. And I have to recognize Nancy for choosing to announce her retirement a month early so that we would have the opportunity to have the best candidates to look at. So I thank her for that, as many things we thank her for this evening, and we'll continue to do that. I have invited principals at this time and district administrators who have interest in Nancy's position and any other administrative positions that might be vacated if someone moved from one position to another to meet with me this month so that internal candidates could be considered first. I've also asked administrators to share any ideas they have for realignment of responsibilities if we would make the changes, and so that should be considered as well. I will be conferring on selection process with the district administrators that aren't interested in the position, and conferring with them on the final recommendation for the position. So. If my recommendation is to the board is an internal candidate, then I am hopeful that I'll be able to bring that to you in January. If it is not at that time, then I would bring to you the process that we would go to for an external candidate. And we have, or will be posting the position in the next week in anticipation of potentially an external process.
Okay, thank you. Moving on then to spring 2013 board election.
So board members, the next board election is on April 2nd, and we have 2 board members in their seats. They've served for the 3 years of election, and that the incumbent Mark Kaiserschott and Pat German. And these incumbents have to give notice if they choose not to run by December 21st. Candidates who are interested in running for office need to complete a campaign registration statement and a declaration of candidacy. And that should not be confused with the nomination papers where you get signatures, and some people think that you have to fill those out and get signatures to run for the Board of Education, and you do not have to do that. So those 2 forms have to be turned in no later than 5 p.m. on Wednesday, January 2nd, in our offices. So again, 5 o'clock Wednesday, January 2nd. And if there are more than 2 candidates for a seat, there would be a primary. So 5 or more would be a primary, and that primary would be held on Tuesday, February 19th. There's information on our website about this as well, and links to these documents, or you can get the documents for candidacy from Diane Radel in my office.
Thank you. Moving on then to committee reports. Learning and Program Development Committee. Brian.
Yep, thanks. We met on November 26th. Keep this short since we covered 2 of the 3 topics. We covered a freshman academy, which has been covered tonight. We covered the new course proposals, which we've already covered. We did a quick update, David Grambo, on the teacher effectiveness pilots. That's a pilot that we're doing with the CISA. And the idea here is that, we may have a better approach to do we may have a different approach than the DPI's approach that will be equivalent. That'll be equivalent of the DPI approach in terms of doing teacher effectiveness. And there's probably more to follow on that. It was just kind of a quick update. I imagine at a certain point it will come to the whole full board. So.
Great. Any questions of Brian? Okay. We'll move
Could
on.
I just add on to that so that you'd have this information? Brian talked about one of the pilots, and we have a small project that we're also doing with the Department of Public Instruction that's moving forward at Hudson Prairie Elementary as well.
Thanks.
Okay, moving on then to the Finance Committee, and that would be Dan Turnahoy.
And I would be Dan tonight. Thank you, Mr. President. The Finance Committee met on Monday, November 26th. First item on our agenda, Tim took us through a first quarter review of the financials, and we are on track and budget throughout the first quarter. The committee then reviewed Policy 3240, which we approved under the consent agenda, as well as the high school facilities assessment contract with ASTR, which the board took action on the topics for action. And then finally, we adjourned to closed session to discuss negotiations with WCEA Teachers Union.
Okay, and I'll give the Facilities and Grounds report. We had 3 agenda items, an update on the secondary space for learning, long-term planning process. Just reviewed where things were at with the Community Advisory Committee and their process in determining selection of those committee members and those timelines that we discussed. We talked about the inclusion of a facilitator as part of that, and decided to move forward with that. And we also discussed architect selection for preliminary issues that regarding any future referendums and so forth. So in addition to that, the 2 policy revisions of 3505 and 3506 were reviewed and discussed and were passed tonight in consent. Virtually those policy revisions just simply identify the primary supervision with the facilities coordinator, Jim Staceco, the facilities and grounds coordinator, and where the principals in the schools served as secondary supervision for. So that was primarily the changes in those policies. So in both the operation and maintenance plant and building and grounds inspections and plans. Any questions? Okay, moving on then to the final one, Mark, Personnel Committee.
Thanks, Tom. Personnel Committee met last Tuesday. We discussed and endorsed the hiring of the high school auditorium site manager, which the board has approved earlier this evening. Mary gave us an update on the Teacher Advisory Committee. This is the committee that was put together to help us construct the handbook in light of changes at the state level, and it's now currently looking at different compensation structures that we'll be implementing going forward. And I just want to say that it was a very, very positive report that these folks are really stepping up and taking the time to work with the district administration, and I just I want to applaud all those teachers that are giving their time, and it's been a very collaborative relationship from what's been relayed to me. So we also endorsed the tentative agreement with the teachers union, which the board approved earlier, and finally we looked at a plan for the consideration of employee salary market adjustments, and I think we have, the timeline right now has that coming to the full board, at least tentatively, in January.
Okay, great. Any questions of Mark? Okay. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn to closed session. We could have the specific language with that.
Mr. President, I'll make a motion to adjourn to closed session pursuant to Wisconsin statutes 19.85, parent 1, parent C, to consider promotion, compensation, and performance evaluation of specific employees.
Motion is second.
Second.
Motion by Mark, second by Lynn. We'll do a roll call vote. Pat?
Chairman, aye.
Kaisershot, aye.
Robson, aye.
Holland, aye.
Gerke, aye.
Bell, aye.
Motion passes. We're adjourned.